thanks. Like, hey, Scoob, did you hear Nikki Blake is hosting a Scooby-Doo panel? No. Yeah. Like on today's Scooby-Doo episode, Scooby-Doo and Shaggy meet Nikki Blake. Yeah, and a Scooby Panel. Like, we need to get this puppy started. Okay, Nikki Blake, take it away, Scooby-Doo.
Welcome to the Scooby Panel. I'm Nikki Blake from ScoobyAddicts.com. I'm joined by Wendy BRYDGE and Cameron Bates, and today we'll be talking to John Dusenberry, who was a story artist on Scoob. John, thank you so much for joining us today. We are super excited to talk to you.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
So the first question, can you tell us how you became interested in art?
Yeah, kind of. My first answer is not exactly, because I don't remember. Like, it's one of those things I've always been interested in, right? I've always loved drawing. I've always loved movies. I've always loved making things and producing things. You know, as a kid, I used to put on little shows for my family and stuff like that, and draw pictures and force them to look at them. When my mom was about to have me, she and my dad went to the Academy Awards. And so technically I was there. And I feel like I've always been trying to slowly find my way back, yeah. But, you know, I grew up, my dad had some cousins who were screenwriters, and I used to take their scripts, copy the formatting, and try to write my own versions on this old computer we had in the 1980s. But I always loved drawing. I figured out how to make my own light table when I was a kid out of our coffee table. Just put a lamp underneath, and paper, with like the tape on the top, and make little images move. My dad put on musicals as a kid, and so I kind of grew up not in the business, but sort of business adjacent. So it's just kind of this thing that was always there growing up, as far as I can remember.
Why were your parents going to the Academy Awards?
They were seat fillers. I think my uncle worked at ABC at the time, and he was able to hook them up with this cool gig one night. So they got to sit next to all sorts of Hollywood royalty, and technically I did too.
So neat.
That's really neat.
Yeah, it's a cool story.
Can you walk us through how you got started as an artist and animator, and kind of walk us through your career? Sure,
yeah. History lesson time. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a circuitous path, right? Like, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people have. I just told you about where I came from, I guess. I guess in high school, it was a typical high school experience. I was a little directionless, kind of drifting around. I was more into music and finding relationships and stuff. But I never did lose that interest in art and in movies and in writing. I really tried my hand in a lot of different things. I was part of this robotics club growing up. My dad was an engineer and a musician. And so I had that, and my whole family went to Princeton, like on his side of the family. So they were all a bunch of doctors. And so I thought maybe I'm going to go do that. So I didn't really know what to do at the end of high school. And I ended up starting a web design studio. This was just before the year 2000, when nobody knew what a website was or why you needed one. And we were trying to sell them not only a website, but like an animated intro, like a splash page to their website. And about 3 years or so. And I kind of got to the point where I realized the only thing I'm really pushing to do here is those animated intros. That seems to be the main thing I want to do. And I realized that, that's it. I want to make movies. I want to make a film of some sort. I want to do animation. So once I realized that, we closed the studio, and my dad helped me figure out that path. I think at the time I was inspired by the guys at Pixar. Like, Toy Story had come out pretty recently, and I forget which movie they were on by that point, maybe Monsters, Inc. And so we looked into that and figured out, wow, all these guys went to this place called CalArts. And I was like, okay, how do I get into CalArts? And then so he talked to some friends, and we figured out that I needed a portfolio and I needed to apply, and you know, just go down that path of trying to put together work good enough to get into a film school. And you know, at the time I was inspired by all the greats, from, you know, Hitchcock to David Lean to Steven Spielberg, you know, everybody who was a great filmmaker. You know, I was raised on movies. You know, in fact, I grew up in Manhattan Beach. So there was a little video store there called Video Archives. And there's just the place I went to get movies. And if anybody recognizes that name, that's where this guy Quentin used to work. And he was just knew everything about movies. And so, you know, at least twice a week I was in there, my family, talking to Quentin, getting recommendations. And then one day he disappears. And then a year or two later, he shows up in the news, and we're like, Quentin Tarantino, is that the same guy from our little movie store? That can't be. Sure, it was, you know. But people like him, you know, kept that spark alive and kept me going. And it just, you know, it's. I wanted to do that. I wanted to become like an independent, a filmmaker that just came from nowhere, kind of thing. Because, like I said, my family, I wasn't like raised in the industry or anything. A lot of people are. So guys like Tarantino or Kevin Smith kind of kept the fire alive for me. And you know, this was like what, late 90s, early 2000s. You know, back when humanity was at its peak. But I sort of fell into animation specifically because, like I said, I could always draw and I loved movies. So I worked on that portfolio to get into CalArts, which always just seemed like this glimmer on the horizon, right? Like, and then once I got there, I quickly learned what it was really like. You know, everybody goes in there super ideal, wants to be a director at Pixar or Disney or something. And then you learn how hard it is. And you learn, you know, that everybody there is just as good, if not much better than you are. And it's tough, you know, and you see a lot of people, there was a lot of competition. A lot of people got plucked out pretty early. Some people left their first year, some people like their second year. And then there was, you know, maybe half the class was left by the end of the 4 years. And, you know, during this whole time too, you know, I had to keep odd jobs and stuff. So I'm still in the back of my mind thinking, engineer, musician. I really like that anthropology class. You know, those things almost kind of stole me away from animation. But I stuck with it. I think my freshman year, I actually had the chance to get plucked away too, but I naively turned down a job from Walt Disney. I didn't quite realize it at the time because of the way they phrased it. They were basically asking me, do you want to leave school and come work for us full time? We'll give you an internship and you can just come into our animation program. And I was like, thinking in the back of my head, like, oh man, that's crazy. I can't believe this. But also, like, I need a college degree, don't I? And so I politely declined. And now I'm like, oh, what have I done? But you know, it happens. I remember my mentor at the time, he told me, he's like, dude, they were offering you a job. I was like, what? No. They were just asking me if I wanted to come back after the internship. He's like, that means, do you want a job? It's like, you gotta be kidding me. And you know, and I was especially kicking myself too, because when I did finally graduate, you know, my focus there was really 2D animation. I didn't get too much into story at the time, but it was definitely on my radar. But I loved animation. I was totally drawn to it. And this was right about when Princess and the Frog came out, which basically the nail in the coffin for 2D animation. So I graduated with these skills in 2D animation that nobody was doing anymore. So I was forced to get jobs at just small little boutique shops around town. I started as an effects animator doing wave animation on a show for MTV that nobody saw because they ended up playing it at 2 or 3 in the morning. But you know, it was character building, right? Like I gained a lot of speed, I gained a lot of experience. And then, you know, at those small studios, I was able to work my way up. You know, I created a web series. I kind of gave myself experiences, right? I kind of put myself out there and said, hey, let me do this. And so, you know, each gig led to more. Started off on like small scale projects, then leads to minor positions on larger projects, and then bigger positions on bigger shows and so forth. It's that, you know, you climb that small ladder, reach the top, and you sidestep to the next one. You're like, oh man, I'm on the bottom rung of a much bigger ladder. But you know, I really just kind of broke into animation by being persistent and taking what I could get. You know, that there's still that dream of directing something at Pixar, right? I don't think we ever let go of that. You know, and the first gigs I had were very far from directing at Pixar. I think my first gig ever, technically doing animation, it might have been this video game company I worked for, but it was rotoscoping sports animation. No, sorry, in-betweening rotoscoped keyframes for sports that was to be used in a health insurance commercial. And it was just the most degrading. Like, I got there and I'm looking around like, this is it. And they listened to this horrible radio station all day. And it was just, you know, it's kind of an embarrassing notch in my belt, but, you know, it also motivated me to keep going. But, you know, I kept on as an animator, and then I did that until I was supervising animation on a couple shows. And then I was directing a few shorts for people, which eventually led to me working on a show called The Three Caballeros for what became Disney Plus. So that was technically my first major storyboarding gig was on that show. And that was one of those things where I went to, I think it was the CEO of the company, and I was like, hey, I want to storyboard on this show. He was like, you're an animator? I was like, yeah, and I can storyboard too. I went to CalArts, blah, blah, blah. And he let me do it. You know, he was like, all right, I'll take a risk on you. And it was great. It was a really good experience. We worked with this guy, Bob McKnight, who's like an animation legend. And he taught us how to draw Donald Duck, Mickey Mouse, all these characters like the old school way, like the ways that the 9 old men knew how to do it, like all the little intricacies and the do's and the don'ts. And it was a really, really great experience. And then when that show was over, the showrunner, Matt Danner, heard about a gig at Warner Brothers on this film that he couldn't say what it was. He's like, hey, you want to try your hand at some feature animation? Just go here to this little tiny trailer in the back lot behind all the facades. And I walk in, I'm like, this can't be the right place. This looks like a trailer. And I walk in, and there's a statue of Scooby-Doo with like a chain around his neck and all this artwork on the wall of, you know, these crazy worlds they're going to. And I was like, oh man, crazy. This is like a Scooby-Doo movie? Is that what we're working on here? And yeah, sure enough, that was the first Scoob film. So I was able to land a spot at Warner Brothers. And then from my experience at Disney, I was able to help out at Walt Disney TV. So I had those two things going on kind of simultaneously for a couple of years. And then at the same time, I also got in touch with my old story mentor from CalArts, who taught these classes online. So I got involved with him, and I teach story theory with him now. And you know, but since that, I've been at Warner Brothers and Walt Disney, although Disney stopped after DuckTales. So yeah, I've worked on, what is this now, 6 films here at Warner Brothers. Eventually working on the new Scoob as the head of story. Yeah, I guess that's it. Yeah, long circuitous road.
Can you tell us what rotoscoping is? I think I said that.
Yeah,
right.
so rotoscoping, and specifically in that job, I mean, you can rotoscope anything, I guess, but rotoscoping is when you have like a picture. So like somebody films a video, and you lay a frame over a frame of the video, and you trace the character, right? And then you skip a couple of frames ahead, and you trace their next pose, and then you in between those traced drawings. It's an old technique. In fact, a lot of the first animation ever was through rotoscoping. The old shoot, I'm forgetting his name. He did Gertie the dinosaur and all that stuff. Windsor McKay. He did all these amazing rotoscope things. I think he did this clown. I forget the clown's name, but it was all rotoscope. But it was amazing. You know, you can add things to it and sort of do things that are impossible. But the basic technique is that it's kind of like the original mocap.
So your work on Scoob, what exactly did you do for that first movie?
On the first movie, I was a story artist. So I got hired on as a story artist. I think at a certain point in production, when it was going through rewrites, I applied to be the head of story there, because by that time I had gained enough experience that I thought I was ready for a position like that. I didn't get it, the head of story position, but so yeah, I was a story artist on that one, and then on this new one, like I said, after, gosh, how many films have been between there? 4 or 5 films between that and this one. The original film, I don't know if you guys know the history about it, got put on like a hiatus, I guess, while it was going through rewrites. So during that time, the story artists who they kept on were sort of passed off to other productions. So I got to work on the Lego movies and Smallfoot and what else was in there? Space Jam was in development. There's probably some others I'm forgetting before we came back. But yeah, so that was the role in that one now, the head of story.
And then for Scoob Holiday Haunt,
So
what was your, what did you do
on
that?
Scoob Holiday Haunt, I'm the head of story. I still technically am, because the production isn't completely shut down yet. So yeah, so that's, you know, and so for anybody who doesn't know, the head of story basically manages the team of all the story artists. And the story artists, you know, their job is to just bring the script to life, you know, and they're kind of like a mini director, mini cinematographer. You know, they're the first stop for acting, some of the writing, jokes. I mean, you name it. Like, they lay the groundwork for everything that you see that comes afterward in the whole production is aside from the script. But you know, the script, it's an interesting thing because the script oftentimes works on the page, but it doesn't always, in fact, a lot of the time, does not translate to the screen. And so that's the main job of a story artist, is to take something that you read and it makes sense, and then reimagine it and tweak it in a way that it's going to tell the same story on a more visual medium.
So we heard the news that supposedly Scoob is not happening, and none of us are happy about this.
Yeah.
How did you find out about it, and what was your initial thought when you found out?
Yeah, it was shocking. We found out the same way you guys all found out, which was just through the trades. You know, I think it was the Hollywood Reporter. Our director, Michael Krinsky, he sends us a text, and he's like, "Is this real?" And then, you know, within a couple hours, we had a all hands on deck meeting to find out, yeah, this is very real. And it's not just us either. They closed the new Batman movie with Michael Keaton, and a couple others got shut down. So yeah, it was pretty shocking, and it was so close to the end. You know, we were, gosh, I want to say maybe 6 weeks away from like final completion. Like finished, like we could send it to a movie theater. So it's a real shame that you know, it's gotten shelved right now. But yeah, our initial reaction was just obviously shock and really sad. And I don't know if it's quite hit me yet. The past 2 years of work that we've all put into it might never see the light of day. It's a hard pill to swallow.
We're all rooting for you guys and hoping that they change their mind and somehow they release it in some way.
Yeah, I'm hoping somehow somebody finds a way to get it out there. You know, it's a film that, like, you know, and it's a bit unprecedented what happened. I've heard of shows getting canceled before. Very rarely, if ever, have I heard that it gets canceled when it's complete. That it's, you know, the only other time this happened was on that Three Caballeros show that I was on. and it wasn't canceled, it was just delayed because this was long before Disney Plus was even a thing. They were still figuring out what Disney Plus was going to be. I think the first iteration of it was just, it was going to be animated content like our show. And so our show was going to be the flagship series to launch the show. But then I think somewhere in that time, they might've been talking about acquiring Star Wars or Marvel or both, or maybe they already had. And it became a much, much bigger thing. And they realized, oh, we can't just launch this with the new Donald Duck series. Like this has got to be a huge, huge launch. But yeah, I've never experienced it on a film before, and it's really a shame too because this film, we were kind of the underdog. We started I guess we started during the pandemic, and it was at the time where everything was going to HBO Max, everything was going to streaming. So they tailored the budget and everything else with that in mind. So it was a smaller film with a smaller crew. I think we had half the time that we get on a normal film and half the budget, but they still wanted it to look as good, if not better, than the original, which I think it does, actually. I think, surprisingly, with half the time and half the budget, it looks twice as good. And the story, I think, is twice as good. And that's all a tribute to our amazing crew, our directors, producers. We had just the right amount of creative control with slipping under the studio's radar, because it wasn't one of their major films to be released in the theaters, that we were able to actually craft something good. It's kind of, I don't want to jinx it, but it's kind of in that same tier as like The Little Mermaid or The Iron Giant, where it's like the studio's like, just whatever, go make something fine. So we're like, okay, great, yeah, they're not really breathing down our necks on this one. We can really do something great. So I hope you all can see it. I hope it gets out there. I hope somehow, some way, because it's a film that really deserves to be seen, and it's a Christmas movie. It's just primed to be the next holiday classic that you just fold into your loop of all the Nightmare Before Christmas and Charlie Brown's and Scoob Holiday Hunt. Yeah, hopefully, fingers crossed.
Yeah, we're hoping. We're all hoping.
Yeah.
Did you watch Scooby-Doo growing up?
Yeah, kind of. Not entirely. Yeah, I wasn't a huge fan of Scooby-Doo. My kids watch it a lot. But yeah, I wasn't like a super fan. I think it was on TV. But I didn't like, I knew what it was, and I obviously knew the characters. I sort of got the whole thing that it's like a spooky show with a laugh track and a talking dog. But it was kind of one of those things, like when it was on, I saw it. But yeah, I'm admittedly not as big a fan as you guys are, clearly, with all the but that's tough competition, I gotta say. Yeah, so yeah, it was yeah, it just kind of fell into the mix of other stuff that I watched throughout the years. I remember those movies that came out, but I think I must have been a couple years out of high school. I think that was when I was starting college when those movies dropped. The live action ones with what's her name? Sarah Michelle Gellar and Matthew Lillard, who went on to do so much of the voice. He kind of reinvented the character. He's the new Casey Kasem, and sort of took over and became the voice of Shaggy. He's great at it. But yeah, I think I was a little bit more into like just Warner Brothers stuff, and the old Walt Disney cartoons, and a bunch of stuff my parents watched. And I had 2 older siblings, so whatever they were into. I think it must have been on reruns when I was a kid. So I think it was on at different times. But yeah, I watched it.
You've done some voiceover work on a few projects. What was that
Yeah.
like? And do you think you'll pursue more acting jobs?
Yeah, it was, voice work is always fun. At CalArts, I studied improv and acting. And so I guess it sort of paid off, right? Yeah, I did a streaming series. Gosh, when was that? 2010, 11, 12, somewhere around there. So I did 2 voices on that. And then, I think from that, I did a lot of student film stuff when I was in school. And then I just recorded things for friends. I remember I had a friend once, he had like an invitation to a party that he wanted me to narrate, that he was animating like an e-card for. So I put on my, my voice that would be like, come to the party. So the little things like that. And then just, scratch for various projects in TV and web series and even movies, including The Holiday Haunt. I did scratch for, let's see, 3 characters, I think, including one that Mark Hamill and I were up for the same role, technically. And as soon as they recorded him, of course, I was out. But yeah, I can say now that, yeah, Mark Hamill and I were up for the same part. Yeah, so yeah, it was super fun. And I've always loved acting. Actually, when I was a little kid, before I got into the idea of like animation, I remember I wanted to be an actor. I think I was inspired by, again, my dad's cousins and friends. We would go to like Ned Beatty's house for a party or something. And so I was kind of like in those circles and I saw it happening. I'm like, oh, this is cool. Yeah, and I love movies. I want to do that. I think it was even before I realized that, like, people make those movies. It's not just the people on the screen. So yeah, it was always a bit of a dream of mine to do acting and pursue it. So if there's any talent agencies that need a middle-aged white guy from LA, I'm sure they'll be knocking down my door.
Did you get to work with any of the voice actors when you did Scoob or Scoob Holiday Haunt?
Yeah. Well, funny enough, Dax Shepard wrote one iteration of the first Scoob. And so he had done, or would have done, I should say, because they didn't go with his version of the film. He would have done a couple voices on the film, and he did all the scratch for the film. So we got to work with him like every day, and his wife came by, and, so I got to introduce my kids. I'm like, this is Anna from Frozen. And yeah, she was sweet. But yeah, then on the second one, part of being such a small crew is, I was kind of folded into the brain trust to really help craft this one. And so part of that included, at least for the first couple rounds, working with the actors and even getting to direct them a little bit, because at the time, we were still storyboarding, and then we were recording the voice sort of in tandem with the post-production process, like the first stage of post-production, which is to take the storyboards and put them up on reels, and moving from scratch dialogue, which I helped direct some of the scratch too to fit the boards. But then we had to do that same process again with the real actors. So yeah, I got to work with, let's see, Michael McKeon was a great one to work with. Of course, Mark Hamill I mentioned. I got to talk to him, which was just surreal. And then McKenna Grace and the young Sheldon boy, Ian Armitage. Yeah, thank you. All the kids, Pierce Gagnon. But yeah, they were all really sweet. The kids were so much fun to work with. And then get to work with these like real established acting legends. So yeah, it was a blast. It's a really fun experience.
Awesome.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
My last question, and it's just because you brought it up. Do you happen to know why Dax Shepard didn't work on the first movie?
Well, I mean, there was a whole version that we produced that was his version that he wrote. And I think it was just creative differences between his version and the studio. I think his leaned a little more adult, and the studio wanted to lean a little more teen kid. There's a lot of stuff in this movie that was really funny, and if you know Dax, it's definitely his brand of humor, which I think at the time, I forget who was in charge. There was a change of leadership at the time too, which I think kind of played into it. But I think they just wanted to create a different brand. But we got it all the way to screening. We had a final screening, and they saw it, and then they passed. So that's when it went back to rewrites. And that became the version that you guys all saw a couple of years ago.
Wendy, you have some questions?
Yes. First, again, John, thank you for joining us because we love
Yeah.
to talk to people who work in the industry. And I mean, you guys are kind of dream makers. You know, we're
Yeah.
adults now,
Yeah,
but the
we're
thing
all
is,
little Willy
we still,
Wonkas. Yeah.
exactly, you know, as adults, we're enjoying it. But when we were kids, we enjoyed it then. There's a whole new generation of kids now, and you guys are doing for them what the old animators did for us. And you're doing it for us as well, because we still love Scooby movies and all the kinds of things that you work on. So thank you for coming and talking to us and sharing a bit of
Sure.
your
Yeah.
life
Yeah.
and your job with us. So my first question is, what's the most challenging project that you've worked on, and what specifically about it did you find to be a challenge?
Most challenging. You know, it's kind of like, it's kind of the thing where each project you work on becomes the most challenging project. Um, you know, it's just always the latest thing. Like, you get put through the ringer on a show, and then by the end of it, you figure out, okay, this is how I should have done everything. Got it. And then on the next project, you go in with all that knowledge and you feel armed, and then something else happens that you've never encountered before. You have no idea how to fix it. Or, you know, there's some weird dynamic in the crew or the production, or there's some problems with budget. You know, there's a million things that could go wrong. And you just kind of never know what that's going to be. That being said, though, I think maybe Cosmos, the TV show put out a couple years ago by Fox with Neil deGrasse Tyson and Seth MacFarlane, that was a tough show for a couple of reasons. For one, it was like a science show, so things had to be like accurate. We were talking about all sorts of, you know, major historical figures, so the science had to be right. The, you know, experiments that we showed had to look technically right, and look entertaining. But besides that too, the production itself was, we had kind of two showrunners. We had Seth MacFarlane, who was working through Fox, and then we had Anne Druyan, which is Carl Sagan's widow. And so there was those two companies with creative control over the show. And a lot of the times their notes kind of conflicted. And so the studio that I was working for was a bit of a middleman, like, okay, which one do we do? You know, I guess we go with Carl Sagan's widow because it's her show and it's her money. But then we have Seth MacFarlane there telling us, you know, his take on everything. His take on specifically animated content that sometimes contradicted what Anne wanted, just from a historical point of view or from a character building point of view. So it was really tough to get stuff done. And on top of that, I don't think Anne, I'm not 100% sure, but I don't think she saw the cuts of the episodes until pretty late in the game. And so some of her notes became major notes that we got at the 11th hour. And we had to fix a few things. There was this one episode in particular, and of course it was the episode with the most animation in it, that she's like, oh, his costume's wrong. And we're like, oh, which scene? She's like, all of it. We're like, what do you mean all of it? Well, she's like, well, you know, he's kind of wearing the same thing. We see him go from a young man to an old man. And, you know, he was at different stages in his life. He wouldn't have worn this then. He wouldn't have worn that there. Could you go back and just do a costume change on everything and make sure that, you know, his appearance and his haircut changes? And we were like, the animation's done. She's like, well, we can't have it like this. So we had to go back into every shot and redo the animation. You know, put new costumes, put them in you know, new time periods, and a lot of the animation was complex too. Like, there was this one scene that I had to redo, that they were doing a waltz. I think it was him and a little girl doing a waltz. He had just made some discovery in his lab, and so I had done this animation before at this waltz, and they're like moving in a waltz pattern in perspective and then moving through the frame like this. And I had to redo the whole thing in a different costume and a different haircut. So yeah, that was challenging. But, you know, and I'm sure there's other projects I'm blocking out, like a lot of the early stuff, like I mentioned that other gig doing the rotoscoping. But, you know, those are different. It's a challenge for a different reason, because I think at that stage, you know, you're really green, you're working on bad projects, and you know, like I said, you have that huge ladder to climb. So it's more of just a world thing. Like it's just the position you're in just seems so small and pointless, and you have this huge ladder ahead of you, this mountain to climb that just seems insurmountable. Which, to be fair, where I am now, the road ahead still looks like that. But you know, it's just different scope, different set of challenges.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm sorry that happened, because that sounds like an absolute
It turned out
nightmare.
great. It turned out really great. No one can tell the difference. You know, nobody ever saw that first cut. But,
Right.
yeah, but it was, that was such a fun show to work on. You know, I grew up watching Cosmos. Like I said, my dad was an engineer, and you know, to work adjacent to Neil deGrasse Tyson, to Seth MacFarlane, who'd done all the Family Guy stuff. It was kind of a dream. It was kind of a dream project, and I was animation supervisor on that. And it was really a really fun project. We got to go to the wrap party. I saw Bill Nye. He was cool. We watched the whole thing on the top of the W Hotel down in Hollywood. It was amazing. Yeah. And gave this amazing speech to Carl, you know, about Carl, about the show and the legacy of the show, the men of science, the women of science, and everybody who came together to create what we created, but in real life. And she I forget exactly what it was, but she had some sort of parallel with Carl and the moon, I think a nickname they had for each other. And then I get a little choked up. She looks up and there's a full moon. She's just like, I love you, Carl. It's just like, oh, we're just like, oh, it just really tugged at the heartstrings. It was a moment.
Yeah, that's really nice.
It was really sweet, kind of powerful.
Yeah. So is there anything that you haven't done yet? Now, this can be job specific, like voice acting, story artist, or is there like a franchise or a specific character that you would still really like to do?
Character, yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot. I remember just a couple of weeks ago, I flipped through an old scrapbook with my daughter of my work when I was like 4 or 5 or something. And I realized as I was flipping through it, I was like, holy crap, look at this. All the stuff I was into as a kid that I drew when I was 4 and 5 years old, I've gone on to make. Like there was drawings from, you know, the Peanuts in there, and there was drawings from, you know, Superman and the Looney Tunes and Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck and DuckTales, and all these shows that I've gone on to do in real life. She was like, why aren't there any Scooby-Doo drawings? I was like, I don't really watch Scooby-Doo. But yeah, so but you know, it's kind of interesting that happened. But yeah, as far as like something that's still on the radar, I don't know. I mean, I'd love to go and produce or direct something. I'd love to, you know, I have a lot of ideas for kind of independent films that studios wouldn't necessarily be interested in that I'd like to do. You know, I've done some low budget directing on live action and animation, but I'd really love to, you know, like I said, produce or direct like a high budget film at a studio or independently. And you know, live action has always been one of my first passions, and I'd love to actually do a big major project in that world. But I don't know if I'm ever, you know, attached to any particular IP. Yeah, I've kind of become less of a fanboy over the years, especially working in the industry for so long. And you've kind of worked on a lot of things, and you've kind of feel like you've done it, you know, and then the stuff I haven't worked on, like, you know, like I would have loved to make a Star Wars film, but at this point now, I feel like they've made every Star Wars film they can make, and they're still making them. But you know, I mean, and that's fine. Like, you know, there's that lesson from George Lucas, where I think it was Spielberg wanted to create a new James Bond franchise, or he wanted to direct James Bond, and MGM was like, no way, sorry. And so Spielberg's like, it's fine, I'll bail you out. You guys have probably heard the story. And he's just like, I got something better than James Bond. He came over and pitched in Raiders of the Lost Ark, Indiana Jones, and just, kind of did his own thing. That was still very much inspired by James Bond. I mean, I think that's a big reason, if not the reason, why Connery is in the third one. It's like a nod to that original conceit of the whole franchise. And so, it's cool to see people do that, to just know that that's an option, that you can be inspired by these IPs, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to do those IPs. In some ways, I think it's better. I think, the world needs more new content inspired by the things we love, rather than more of the same content. I mean, certain IPs, I think, are kind of timeless, and they deserve to live on forever, like the Muppets or Scooby-Doo. And those are fun IPs to play in. But yeah, I think, at this point, it's just about, making my own material inspired by other IPs. That being said, I think I have like a Lord of the Rings sequel in mind that I'd love to pitch. The Tolkien estate would never approve. And that was always like a fun hobby, like creating sequels to films that I loved. I think when I was in second grade or first grade, maybe, I put together like this packet of artwork and little stories of the Back to the Future series, which I was just obsessed with as a kid. I think I wrote all the way up to like Back to the Future Part 25, little one sheets, with like the little picture they give you in second grade and the 3 lines that you can write underneath. But there's a lot of stuff too that I feel like hasn't quite been done right, and whether it's live action or animation, because that line's kind of getting blended these days, which is like, it's a great thing. Like nobody's really, there was that movie, the Michael Crichton movie Timeline, that was always a favorite of mine. But so the book is a favorite of mine. I feel like they didn't quite get it in the movie. Jurassic Park either, for that matter, if that's bold enough to say. The book is something else. The book is dark and scary. It's a scary dinosaur movie that, Spielberg turned into a family-friendly romp through the park. It'd be cool to see the real Jurassic Park. But yeah, there's all sorts of stuff. I grew up reading, Clive Barker and Jack London and Stephen King and Ray Bradbury. I mean, just pick a franchise from one of those guys. I'd love to turn that to something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So kind of in the same vein, but
yeah.
I want you to be specific.
Uh-oh.
You wake up tomorrow doing your absolute dream job.
Okay.
Anything.
Oh.
It doesn't matter how crazy or how realistic, your dream job. What is it? What are you working on, and what are you doing?
I think I would be, that's a big question. I think I would be, if I'm in animation, I would be helping to write and direct this Clive Barker story called The Thief of Always. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the book. Scooby-Doo fans would actually really love it. It's about this boy who gets this, I forget how he ends up at this house, but he ends up at this house called the Holiday House. And it's what it sounds like. It's every holiday exists every day in this house. And there's these fun characters that sort of lure you in, and every day's Christmas Eve, and every day's Halloween, and every day's Easter. And, all the major holidays are there. And it just seems like a dream. And he keeps going and going and going. And eventually he starts to realize that the house is a trap, and that it's taking the souls of the kids, I think it is, and making them part of the house. Like, I remember there was like a stained glass window, and he realizes like that's one of the kids he interacted with, and he's like trapped in the window, and he can only come out at night when he's part of that holiday. And yeah, it's got a really fun twist at the end. I don't want to spoil it, but I think if I were doing an animated project and they said you could do anything, I'm sure it's tied up in licensing, but I think that would be it. It just has the right flavor of everything I'm interested in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds amazing, because now I want to watch it. That's for sure.
You should definitely go read the book. Definitely read the book.
It's
a quick read. Yeah, it was one of my favorites growing up. Always stuck with me.
Yeah. So there are a lot of talented artists within the Scooby community, people who do fan art and all kinds of things like that. And a lot of them will be watching this panel. So if you wouldn't mind sharing, what's the best piece of art related advice that you've been given that you could share with us?
Advice. Like art related advice, like about being an artist or a filmmaker or
Honestly, anything,
anything.
whatever, anything that you think would be of value for us that maybe we could get something out of.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of a cliche, but you know, and I guess I could expand on this, but like really follow your dream. Like whatever your passion is, you know, what's that job that you would do for free, or what's the job that you would pay somebody to let you do all day, you know, if you could. Find whatever that is. Like, you know, if money is no object, do that. And you know, that's kind of a lofty statement, but you know, it's I guess my advice would be to follow your dream, but make your own journey. Like for me, I love to write, I love to draw, I like to tell stories. I love movies, but specifically for me, I think it all is about just the magic of it all. And I think that's the thing that keeps me going. Like there's something about a film that's just, it's just kind of slapped together. Like I don't think how many people realize how slapped together these things are, and how, you know, that like you're just so nervous that it's going to split at the seams and the things are going to fall down. It's this an illusion that we create that, you know, is held together with Scotch tape and, you know, plaster of Paris. You know, it's an illusion that stops at the edge of the frame. You know, in animation, you know, you pan that camera a little bit to the left, you see the edge of the drawing or some scribbles, just writing as a direction, like a sketch of what's on the main stage. And it's not very different in live action. You know, whether it's the edge of a matte painting or if it's a dude standing there with a boom mic or a clipboard, and they're literally just like they're right here. They're like right there. And if you could only tilt the camera, the illusion would be broken. And it's like a magic trick. And I think for me, that's, you know, the heart of my passion. I just watched that new documentary, Light and Magic. You guys seen that?
No.
It's a new documentary on Disney Plus about the guys who started ILM, and sort of the journey of like what that entailed, who was involved, and all their different skill sets coming together. And it's super inspiring. And, you know, they highlight all the movies that they've done over the years, starting with, you know, the first of the Star Wars films. And for anybody who loves film, just needs to watch that. It'll just reinvigorate the wonder of it all. But yeah, I think yeah, to sort of sum up, like, you know, so that's my passion. So whatever your passion is, you know, follow that passion and just keep it in your crosshair, because it's going to change, it's going to shift around. But, you know, keep your eye on whatever that drive is. You know, and your journey, yeah, I took you through my long, really boring journey, but it's going to be very different than mine. I've never met anybody who had the same, you know, I worked next to people over the years, for how many years I've been doing this. Nobody has the same story. You know, there was people who I came up in CalArts with who were like, went to this special high school, like tailor-made for animation, and basically just like fed straight into CalArts and then fed straight into Pixar. That was their path. There's other people who were like master artists from another country that came somewhere. There's people who didn't go to school at all who are working next to me. They have no degree. They, you know, and they're amazing. There's this one girl who was working at the Warner Brothers tour, and she applied. There was like a student film program that she heard about. So she made a film and applied, and she won this contest. And part of the prize was you get to try your hand working in animation at Warner Brothers. So that was her story. So, you know, everyone's going to have their own version of this crazy, circuitous mess of a way to get here. But I think one of the biggest one of the key elements in it, that in my experience, is to give yourself the work experience that you need to get where you are, because no one's going to offer it to you. I just, as I mentioned earlier, you know, like when I wanted to shift to storyboarding, I literally walked into my CEO's office, said, "Hey, I'd like to have a discussion with you. I want to storyboard on this," which is something I learned from my grandmother, who way back in the days of the old Paramount Studios, she and her sister, who was a dancer, I think she got a pass to visit her sister. She danced in old movies like Casablanca and stuff like that. And she was just on set, and she's like, "I'm going to work here." And so she's on set of a movie. She wasn't supposed to be there. And somebody asked her what she's doing there, and she just pointed to the machine next to her. And I operate this. And they're like, "Really?" She's like, "Yeah. Oh yeah, I totally do that." I'm like, okay. And then, you know, just sort of build it on there. And she like asked somebody how to do it. She started doing it, and she goes to payroll. She's like, "I'm not getting a paycheck. I'm doing this job. Where's my paycheck?" She would even go in every 6 months, like clockwork, and demand a raise. You know, even if it was small raise, and she always got it. You know, she always said that it never hurts to ask. Worst they're going to say is no, but at least you asked. At least you tried. But the key to all that is carving out your own journey. Yeah.
Well, that's excellent. That's excellent advice. And just please know that nothing that you have said tonight has been boring. Okay. Nobody here is bored.
All right.
So please don't apologize for that.
Very kind of you to say.
Enjoying it very much. And my last question before I turn over to Cam is just a fun one.
Okay.
So kid age John, what is he getting up early on Saturday morning to watch?
Oh my God. Yeah.
You can't miss it. You are getting up as early as you can because you don't want to miss it.
How much time do we have? God, yeah. I mean, you're asking me to think back like 35, 40 years. Like this is like early 80s TV, it must have been, right? So, I mean, I guess I never missed an episode of He-Man, or, you know, I remember watching Looney Tunes, like the old classic Wile E. Coyote stuff, which was so cool on Space Jam to be able to work with those characters. Yeah, I don't know. It's a bit hazy what I would watch Saturday morning. I remember watching a lot of VHS tapes, which for the kids out there was this black box that you like stuck into a machine, and it had this magnetic tape that the film existed on, and you just prayed to God that like it didn't get like grinded up in the gears as you were watching it. Oh my gosh, old shows. Like, I don't know about Saturday morning, but I remember, I guess they were like reruns of like the old classics, like the Jetsons, the Flintstones, but also like their live action counterparts, like the Mary Tyler Moore Show or the Dick Van Dyke Show, Happy Days, Gilligan's Island. Like these were all on reruns, like on Nickelodeon or something. The Munsters. Oh, love the Munsters. The Addams Family. I think the Jim Henson stuff was on PBS. I was a huge Jim Henson fan. I love the Muppets. That'd be an IP I'd love to play with. Yeah, I have some friends who work for the Muppets, and I'm always really jealous of them. Yeah, what the Muppets, Muppet Babies, Fraggle Rock. I think Jim Henson was one of my biggest influences as a kid, kind of now that I think about it, more than like guys like Walt Disney or Chuck Jones. I didn't know who they were. But, you know, Jim Henson's name was across the title of every episode of his shows. And, you know, he made Kermit the Frog. And it's just, yeah, it was really, really inspirational. I could literally probably sit here and think all day about shows I used to watch. There's a lot of stuff I watched that was, you know, stuff that my parents had lying around that I was kind of exposed to, or like my older brother and sister had around. There's a lot of classics, like, you know, the old Christopher Reeves, the Superman movie. My mom watched this show called Beauty and the Beast, which was not based on the animated show. I think it came out before it. It was with Terminator, Linda Hamilton, is that her name? And Ron Perlman, who played the Beast with all this the prosthetic work. So it was just like, as a kid, you're just like, holy shit, there's a beast that lives in the sewers. It's, you know, and I think actually that was the show that George R.R. Martin worked on I'm not mistaken, in his early days on HBO. So yeah, and that obviously his stuff has been well, his books were good. Show up to the Hodor episode was good.
Aw.
Yeah. But yeah, I grew up watching Ghostbusters, both the movie and the animated show. Dennis the Menace. What was that show? It was like dinosaurs and people rode them and they had lasers.
The Land Before Time.
No, there's no lasers. Land Before Time. That was good too. Dino Riders, I think it was called. These are shows that nobody's gonna ever know about. Dino Riders, Denver the Last Dinosaur. That was a super 80s show. It's about a dinosaur that this kid was harboring in his room that would like wear a backwards hat and ride a skateboard. It's fantastic.
And now I'm gonna have the theme song.
Yeah, right.
All night.
Denver, the Last Dinosaur. Yeah. Boy, that takes me back. I mean, yeah, so much. A lot of stuff on Nickelodeon. Pee-wee's Playhouse, right? That was a great show. And Punky Brewster. There was this weird, I think it was a Warner Brothers production. It was the Super Friends. So like Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman. I don't remember if it was a tape or just something I saw on TV, but they got sucked into the Wizard of Oz franchise and turned into the Wizard of Oz characters and had to go on the Wizard of Oz journey. It was the most bizarre thing, and I've seen it a million times. It's one of those weird, like I think for some reason I grew up watching just strange stuff, not that Jim Henson, those guys are strange, but I mean, it's kind of strange. The Dark Crystal, but it's, that I feel like that stuff is more in line with my aesthetic and humor, like, which is more like Monty Python and Mel Brooks kind of stuff. And I would lump Jim Henson into that side of the spectrum. Yeah. But I'm trying to remember back now, like mornings for me were waking up early to listen to the radio station, K Earth 101. I don't know if you guys are from or know of LA. There was this radio station in LA. And so I would listen to that until Mr. Wizard came on. And then I think it was followed by Mr. Rogers and then Sesame Street. And then Reading Rainbow. Was that Saturday morning? I feel like that was all Saturday morning. So those are my weekends. Then afternoons was like the Disney afternoon. Evenings were Snick. If you guys remember Snick. You guys look old enough to remember Snick. Those were great.
Yeah.
Was Ren and Stimpy on Snick? I think it was.
I think it was for a while.
I think it was at least during the Halloween episodes. I just remember there's like Snick Halloween where they had the telethon. You could call in, like win stuff or whatever. And they had like, do you remember all this? Oh my God. Yes. Me and my brother just, it was fantastic. What were those like, are you afraid of the dark? Oh, so
yes. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. But yeah, there's all sorts of other, I watched a lot of stuff, like I said, like my parents had. So like I wasn't necessarily up watching Saturday morning cartoons every week. I was, popping in the tape for like Romancing the Stone and Out of Africa. And my mom had this old Leslie Nielsen movie called Tammy and the Bachelor. It's this old, back before Leslie Nielsen was a comedic actor, when he was like a young, handsome, really debonair guy with like oil slicked hair. And, and then, like I mentioned before, we would get recommendations from Tarantino. So like at a young age, we would go into his shop and he would recommend all sorts of stuff. He introduced us to all the John Candy movies. So like Uncle Buck, the John Hughes movies, like Mr. Mom and Ferris Bueller. And I guess Ferris Bueller might have come later, but just really good stuff. And then, my dad raised me on all the old classic, Universal horror movies. So like Frankenstein and Dracula and The Mummy and King Kong, all those great stuff. I mean, all the classics. And I just absorbed it all as a kid. I wasn't necessarily a cartoon kid. I remember staying up late with my dad watching Cheers and Taxi and the Letterman Show. I think when the theme song to MASH came on, I knew it was bedtime. That show was like a little too adult for me probably, and he was like, all right, bedtime. So that song always put me to sleep. But yeah, I don't know. We could, like I said, we could talk all night about this. Different shows I watched, but yeah, a lot. Big eclectic mix of stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Trip down memory lane. Yeah.
Well, John, let me just say it's an
Amen.
honor to talk to you. And I think I can speak for all of us. When we watched the first Scoob movie, it was absolutely excellent. It was just a great movie. Yeah, you guys really took a lot of our Hanna-Barbera childhood dreams and just put it into a movie.
Yeah.
So we thank you so much.
You're welcome. Yeah, that was a feat to squeeze everything in. And there used to be more. There used to be a lot more in there, I've heard. But yeah, there's a lot more characters in there. We've sort of peeled them back as we had to.
For sure. Yeah. And I want to let you know too, we like I said, all of us in the community are using the hashtag Save Scoob Holiday Haunt. So we are not going to slow down. We're going to keep on going. We're going to keep pushing for it. And I know there's I think 3 or 4 petitions out there. So
is there really? Wow.
Yeah.
I know the son of our co-director started one of them. I don't know who started the other ones, but
Bill Haler's or Holler?
Yeah. I think he pronounces it Holler. Yeah, Bill
Holler. Okay, so Ben, I think it was Ben Holler who started it.
Ben Holler, yeah, that's right.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that one got a lot of traction those first couple days, and I hope they're still floating around. If anybody watches this, please try to sign them. Maybe get on the news and something. Just get kind of out there. But
sure,
it's a shame.
I know. Well, I got a couple questions for you, and like I said, it's an honor to have you on here.
Thank you.
So I know you were saying earlier that you didn't watch a lot of Scooby-Doo, but you know, for us fans, we got to know, for any series or movies that you have seen Scooby-Doo, do you have a favorite, whether it's a series or movie?
I mean, it's got to be the classic. I mean, the original Scooby-Doo, Where Are You, right? This is the first one called. And yeah, I definitely watched it growing up. Like I said, obviously I just ran through a whole list of other things I watched, so you can see how it fell into the mix. But I think especially working on Scoob, it sort of forced me to get back into it. And so for the first movie, at least, we watched a lot of the new shows. We framed it in terms of what not to do in the movie, because the movie really had, our goal was to harken back to that original series and capture the flavor of that original series as best as we could, while at the same time roping in so many other Hanna-Barbera franchises. So I watched a lot of reference. I've at this point I've seen too much Scooby-Doo. But that being said, and I might be biased, and I know you guys might never see it, but I think Holiday Haunt is my favorite Scooby-Doo. And I'll tell you why, because I think, especially coming from somebody who wasn't like a super fan growing up with Scooby-Doo, I think it's the best iteration of the characters while still keeping the essence of what makes the show great. The things that make the show great is like, it's spooky and scary, but it's lighthearted. It kind of has like a Ghostbusters vibe, which was a huge reference on the first movie and the second one. We always were referencing Ghostbusters because we're like, if there's any other IP out there that's kind of like Scooby-Doo, it's Ghostbusters. It just has that strange mix of stuff that works. And then for this new one, being a holiday movie, we also roped in The Nightmare Before Christmas, because that too kind of has that same vibe, but very specifically for Christmas, like Christmas meets Halloween. But it's a Halloween show. The premise is very simple. Every episode's exactly the same, and they found a great kind of formula. And these characters how do I say this? They were intentionally flat, I think, right? They weren't designed very deep, and that was actually a huge challenge on both films. Like, how do we honor these characters and stay true to the characters that were designed to be flat? They were designed to be one-dimensional, and give them more and not break the original. It was a real challenge, but I think this one, even more so than the first one, we really nailed it. I think part of it too is the luxury of them being kids, where they're still figuring out, like, they're not yet the adults in that series. in the first series, so we can kind of take some liberties and show you how they became those flat characters. But no, like, it was a great, it had the spookiness, it had the great formula of, it's always the first guy you meet is the villain, and then there's an unmasking at the end, and lots of spooky gags in between. The cheesy laugh track. Scooby and Shaggy love to eat. Fred's kind of the leader. Velma's the brains behind the operation. Daphne, is kind of like the emotional core of everything. But yeah, and so I think too, like, audiences, we try to appreciate what audiences over the years, what's it been, 60 years or something, right? 50 years?
53.
53.
Mm-hmm.
My God, that's incredible. I love how you guys all knew that answer immediately. 53,
we were like,
6 months, 24 days, and 10 hours. Yeah, no, like, I think audiences have tacked on a lot because the show was designed to be kind of flat and generic, that they've tacked on a lot that they felt was implied or maybe saw in themselves. Whether it's the different relationships between the characters, like the whole Frafney thing that we learned was a thing, which don't Google that, by the way. Or the Daphne Velma relationship, which don't Google that either. But you crave something from these characters, like something deeper, because they're so likable, and it's such a treat to watch them, that we really put it upon ourselves to deliver a movie that filled that gap for you while staying true to the IP. And I really think we did it. These characters, they're more real than you've ever seen them be, and you really get to see in this new movie how they became the mystery team. And you get to see them go through their own personal arcs. You get to see them bond and grow together, all under the warm blanket of Christmas. It's such a great film. You guys need to see it. Sorry, and I'm really trying not to be biased here. I hope you trust me, because I'm not a huge Scooby-Doo fan. Like, I really think it's something good.
Well, Puppy Scooby is adorable too. So
It is.
like
It is,
Puppy
and
Scooby,
we made
and
him more
Christmas.
adorable.
Oh.
We redid the model a little bit to make him more adorable.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, we do trust you, and back in the 80s, there was a time where Hanna-Barbera had like lots of these kids shows. So there was a show called A Pup Named Scooby-Doo,
Right.
and for us three, we loved that series. And it was just basically when they were kids. So when y'all were doing this movie and y'all had them where they were kids, and Scooby was a puppy, I mean, that was just in a Christmas movie, I mean, it was just perfect. You know?
Yeah. And and to be fair to that franchise, we definitely, our executive producer, Tony Cervoni, he definitely was conscious of that series and didn't want to step on any toes. I forget the guy's name who created that one, but we made it very clear, like, we're not doing that. Like, don't worry, we're not gonna. It's not a redo of what you've already done. This is something new. And I've seen a few of those for reference, that show. It's I feel like it leans more toward the classic. You could correct me if I'm wrong here, guys, but it's a little more original Scooby-Doo flavor, a little of that Saturday morning cartoon flavor too, from like the early 90s, if I recall. Yeah, they all had that certain tone and aesthetic to it. It was just with the Scooby-Doo characters.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I know with Scoob Holiday Haunt in the state it's in, I know it's kind of hard to talk about, but when you were working on Scoob Holiday Haunt, did you have a favorite scene that you were when you were working on the movie? Was there a favorite scene that you loved working on?
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of favorite scenes, a couple of not favorite scenes too. That the studio, yes, and I don't know if I can talk about it because spoilers and stuff. But I I hope you all can see it soon. And I guess I can say that my favorite sequence in this new one was the, how do I say this? It's a very Scooby-Doo mystery finding, solving scene. There's two scenes that kind of are married together. You know, as you might expect, there's a scene where they set out to find clues to solve a mystery. And we really, it's really a labor of love, right down to the score. You know, our amazing composer, Dara, she somehow was able to take the feel and the vibe of the original soundtrack of the show and like amp it up to like an orchestral score that still feels like the show. Like it's just so groovy, and spooky, and fun. And, it just really adds to everything. And we threw a ton of classic style gags in there, a lot of nods to the original show, just in this one sequence even. You know, and roping in stuff from the rest of the story. You know, the larger mystery, which I can't get into, but I really think it was, you know, the best scene in the movie, followed by a couple of scenes later, a scene which is always the toughest thing to do in a film, which is like a talking heads scene, where they're all sitting around just talking about what they know, what they don't know, etc. And it's a pretty long scene too. And somehow, and I think this is a tribute to the story. The script was written by Paul Dini. He did the first draft, and then, you know, obviously we all added to it, workshopped it. But it's such a hard thing to accomplish. You know, a lot of people say it's a hard thing to accomplish, especially in animation. It's just characters sitting talking. But I think the mystery is so intriguing that it really works, and then it kicks off into some really fun stuff.
That's awesome.
Sorry, I can't say more.
No, but I even saw Tony Cervoni posted the other day, you know, that there's, you know, they were doing the soundtrack, you know, on the stage. I just thought that was so cool, you know. So it was neat to see him post about that.
Yeah,
I thought that was neat. My next question for you is, you know, like we said, Scooby-Doo's been going 53 years strong. I know this is a little bump in the road, and hopefully, and we were praying that this film does get to see the light of day. Do you think that Scooby-Doo should keep going on strong with series and movies and merchandise?
For sure. I think, like I said earlier, there's a couple franchises out there in the world that kind of deserve to live on forever. Scooby-Doo is definitely one of those. And I think from its inception, like I said earlier, it's always been the same formula for the show. It was kind of designed to repeat. You know, and I can't think of many other IPs that had the sustainability of that. I mean, all these shows, you know, got canceled. We're not seeing a ton of new episodes of the Jetsons or the Flintstones or anything else. Not that those aren't great, but there's something that's so comfortable about Scooby-Doo. It's just like a warm blanket, right? You just, you know, and it's fun. It has edge to it. You know, it has this Halloween aspect to it, which for me is my favorite holiday. And it's just like to just like dip my toes into Halloween whenever I want to. It's just really fun, you know. Like my favorite ride at the Disney parks is the Haunted Mansion. And so it just, you know, it feels a little like that. And it's just like, yeah, I could ride that ride forever. And, you know, and it's, you know, and it's in the, it's one of those IPs that's now in the hands of you guys, all the fans. I mean, look behind you guys. It's you guys clearly own this now. And, you know, the fact that this podcast you guys hold is going strong, and, you know, where there's a demand from the fans, there's going to be people like me, you know, trying to do our best to provide great new content and to honor the characters and to take them places you haven't seen before without breaking the characters, which is a fun challenge for somebody like me. So yeah, I hope it keeps living on forever. It's great. Yeah.
And like I said, you guys have done a fantastic job with keeping them alive. So we thank you for that.
Yeah.
My last question for the night. When you worked on Scoob, did you and your kids get to sit down and watch Scoob together? And did they enjoy watching Scoob with you?
Yeah. I mean, like I mentioned earlier, they watch it now. Like they watch. I mean, Scoob, our movie, of course, but they were inspired enough to watch the original show and anything they could find on our little Apple TV, right? Like, but my kids in particular, you know, had the luxury of being at the studio while we were making Scoob. So not only did they sit down to watch the final Scoob, but they've seen every iteration of Scoob. They've seen, you know, every little thing that I've worked on and looked at on my screen every day. You know, especially now during this whole the whole work from home thing. You know, we made Scoob 2 entirely here, I mean, at my house. So yeah, they've seen every version that there was of it, all the stuff on the cutting room floor, all the alternate cuts that, you know, we took it in a direction that we ended up changing our minds on the original Scoob and on this one. I mean, like on the original Scoob, we used to have like Jabberjaw was in the movie.
Oh wow!
And she had like a big musical dance sequence underwater, and there was like an old pirate ship that was underground. Captain Caveman had a much bigger part. We were pulling from like we were really reaching through the different Hanna-Barbera properties. We had what's her name? Penelope Pitstop. She was in it. Adam Ant was in it. Grape Ape was in it. I mean, all these characters. I think the only one that really lasted was Dastardly, Muttley. KV made a brief appearance, from what I recall. Is there other characters? Oh, the Blue Falcon, of course. Anyway, that's a tangent, but yeah, they've definitely seen all that stuff, so it's pretty cool. And what's really funny about that too is, you know, they remember stuff from the movies that nobody else is ever going to see, right? Because we're always aiming to make memorable, iconic material, right? And a lot of times we do. It's just not right for the final film, or the studio doesn't want to go that way or something. But given that the kids have seen it, you know, they'll remember it. That they'll remember little bits of acting, or they'll remember lines that used to be in the movie. Both in the original and this new one, you know, there's songs, you know, my 4-year-old was just, there's a couple songs in this new movie and he was singing the songs. And, you know, he must have, I don't think he saw that sequence. He must have been 3 years old or something. So, I mean, you know, we're really striving to like make an impact. To me, that's evident that we are, because if my kid hears that song a couple days in a row, just from my computer speakers, and he's singing it a year later, I feel like we did something right. So yeah, they've seen it, they love it. They were very disappointed to hear that this isn't coming out to theaters. Although they of course feel a little special, but they're the only kids in the world who have ever seen it and might ever see it. But I'm sure eventually somehow everybody will be able to see it. Because like I said, this franchise isn't going anywhere. It's not going to die. You know, it's not like we're going to stop making Scooby-Doo just because one movie was canceled. And sooner or later, this is going to see the light of day. Yeah, hopefully before they complete that. Who was it that just pitched like an R-rated Scooby-Doo they wanted to make? Yeah. Which, hey, it'll be fun.
I hear you. I bet your kids were in heaven when they were at the studio getting to see all the behind the scenes. That's pretty cool.
It was, yeah. I think, you know, it's one of those things where I don't know if they fully appreciate it, but they probably will one day. I don't know if you heard this story from Walt Disney's kids when they used to come around the studio and see all the workers and everything. And, you know, they would go to school. You know, they knew who their dad was. But one day, I think his daughter came home from school. She ran in the door and she was like, Dad, are you Walt Disney? He was like, yeah, what do you mean? Of course I am. Your dad, Walt Disney. Of course I'm Walt Disney. What are you talking about? He said, no. Like, the Walt Disney? And, you know, she was like, realized who he was. And she was just like starstruck and just like, oh my God, I can't believe this. I'm the daughter of Walt Disney. Yeah, so
I love it.
I'm sure, yeah, not that I'm anywhere close to his or any of us are really. The guy was a genius, but I'm hoping one day our kids, appreciate sort of the luxuries they had growing up at the studio. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I have a couple more questions for you.
Please, yeah, this is fun.
In Scoob, there were a ton of references and Easter eggs. So I did a video and I found about 140.
Oh my God. Okay, what have we got? I
can send you the link of the video if you want to see it. Were there a lot of references and Easter eggs in Holiday Haunt?
Oh my God, yes. Like, okay, so yeah, so not even just Scooby-Doo references, of which there are tons, but references also to other movies and franchises that inspired us. A lot of Ghostbusters references, some Nightmare Before Christmas references, a lot of, given that it's a Christmas movie especially, we reference almost every Christmas movie out there that we could legally get away with. I think maybe we weren't allowed to say Grinch or something like that, but yeah. But yeah, there's so many. And in my department, the story department, I kind of put it upon myself to really have fun with this one and pay homage where appropriate. I was like, if anything in the story is even remotely like some other film that inspired this, I want to put some sort of nod to it, whether it was like, oh, that composition is kind of the same as that shot from Ghostbusters or Jurassic Park or, Christmas Vacation or, all these movies that we all grew up knowing and loving. We really had fun with that. And any chance we could, we made a reference and planted an Easter egg. There's Easter eggs even for the crew. Little things we snuck in there. Other Hanna-Barbera properties found their way in here and there. Lines of dialogue reference a lot of stuff. Gosh, yeah, there's so much. It's hard to say it without telling. But yeah, the first one, yeah. Do you remember any Easter eggs you found in the first one? I'm trying to remember what there was.
So there were a lot of references to like other Hanna-Barbera shows. The one that I missed that I couldn't believe I missed was, I think the Ferris wheel had the Jetsons car. And I totally missed that one. Yeah.
Wow, that's more than I paid attention to. Crazy.
I wish I could. There were comic books. There were some comic books that were in Shaggy's room on the floor.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And they were like actual comic books.
And that probably came from Tony, who he in his office. His office was like walking into like a boutique shop, like a crazy Halloween themed boutique shop. And he just had everything: monster movie sculptures. And one of the things he had was a stack, like a rack that you would find in a comic book store, filled with comic books. And those are just the ones he kept at the office. So I am sure that those are actual comics that he put in there on purpose.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's lots of fun Easter eggs in there. I think somewhere, I might be wrong about this, there might be the skeleton of Jabberjaw as a sort of internal nod to the fact that she used to be in the movie.
Okay. I missed that one.
It might be in there.
Yeah.
There's lots of stuff in the treasure room that was there, including, I think, somewhere the Ark of the Covenant, maybe, and the idol statue from Raiders. I think those are in there. Could be wrong, but I remember it being talked about.
Yeah.
And of course, there's a whole sequence that's an Easter egg in that movie, which is when they transition from kids to adults. That was actually a very late decision to do that. We had all sorts of other transition ideas, or we were going to put credits there or something. And I remember the story team pushing and pushing and pushing, saying like, guys, it's obvious we have to do a CG, like as faithful as we can, original intro of the show, of the kids running through the haunted house and zipping past Frame and Fred falling back, and everything. It has to be like shot for shot. So we eventually did, including the very last frame in which the I think it was a two cell bit of animation where the characters are like all together reading a book, and then in one frame they all look up. And so we made sure, like in one frame in CG, they just pop into that pose. Yeah, down to little details like that. We made sure we're in there. And that was really fun. It was so fun, really satisfying to see that one come to life. And there's a similar thing in Scoob Holiday Haunt, which I can't talk about.
In the Scoob movie, there was a bulletin board, and the bulletin board had like all these different pictures, and there was a picture of a dog, and I knew that the dog had to be important, but I didn't know why. It was Tony Cervone's dog.
Oh, was it Sherman?
But yeah, but I didn't know what his dog looked like, so I had no idea. But I knew that that dog had to be important.
Yep, I think, yeah, it was like a beagle type dog.
I think so.
Yeah, so that's Sherman, who has sadly left us.
Oh.
And yeah, one spoiler I'll say, Sherman might be in the new movie. And I honestly don't remember if we kept him in, but we at one point definitely had a final nod to Sherman. Rest his soul. He was a sweet dog. Yeah. But yeah, he was in the first movie for sure. Was it in the no, it was in the dastardly sequence when they go into his lair, right?
Yeah.
And then they go and there's the pictures of Muttley, and then there's another dog on the wall or on the desk or something, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. One of our artists, I think it might have even been Mike Okrinsky, who co-directed this one, painted that. Can't remember. But yeah, those are always fun. And those are the kind of like inter-studio nods that we put in there that no one's ever gonna know but us. But that's great that you guys caught that. How did you know?
Later, well, I knew the dog had to be important, and later he had posted something on Instagram saying that it was his dog.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. They're good people. He and Allison, their dogs. They have a new dog now. I don't know if that dog's in the movie. Maybe. There used to be a lot more dogs in the first movie. Speaking of dogs, there used to be a whole Scooby-Doo love story with a dog called Talia, I think her name was. She was like a fluffy little white dog, and there was some other dog who was like, I think he was her boyfriend or something, but she actually liked Scooby, and all these other dogs involved. But it was way too much story. I think that was in the Dax version. We had all those dogs. So there was a big thing, and you get to see like we created a new origin for Scooby, a couple different origin stories for Scooby, actually, different alternatives of like how Shaggy ended up finding him. Yeah, it was fun. It was a lot more dog centric, that movie, with the whole. I mean, it still ended up pretty dog centric, right? The whole. No, actually, there used to be these characters called the Night Hounds, that when they opened the gates at the end of the movie, it wasn't just the three-headed dog that came out. There was like an army of Greek dogs, and I think it might have been a budgetary reason. We just couldn't afford to do that much. But it was like in Lord of the Rings, like green dogs that just like rushed and took over Athens. And a lot of funny gags that we had, like a lot of dog gags that we had, like little sight gags, like the old Pixar style gags, those early movies where there would just be these little cutaway things happening in the background, which was a lot of fun to do for the story team. But yeah, it ended up being too expensive, so we couldn't do it. Yeah, lots of fun Easter eggs.
Cam, you had a question?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I loved in the movie how you guys put like when they were flying to Mezek Mountain, like Don Mezek, and then there's like Takamoto,
right.
So it was really paying, and we were talking to that because after we watched Scoob, all of us, we talked about it, and we loved how, so in the movie, how it just really, it really paid, so much respect to those original creators and artists and the people who, you know what I mean? So that's
for sure. And that was super intentional. And Tony is probably one of the biggest Scooby-Doo fans. I mean, he's worked on so many of these, and so he really, I mean, he and Spike Brandt, they really know the property inside and out, and it's just no big deal for them to throw in any reference. They know everything about everything. There's walking encyclopedia of Scooby.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's really fun working with them. It's cool. Lots of old stories. Working with the original guys. Yeah, it's it's such a fun world to play in, fun sandbox to play in. So much you can do with it. It's so pliable. Like, because I said earlier, they're designed so flat. So it's like almost in some ways you can do anything with them, as long as you respect that original IP. Yeah, it's cool. What do you guys all do? Is this? I mean, this is you have this podcast going. Do you guys do anything else Scooby related, art related?
So I run a website, ScoobyAddicts.com. I run a second website, ScoobyMuseum.com, where people can keep track of their collections.
That's so cool.
And then I do like daily posts of birthdays, Scooby-Doo history, anything related to Scooby-Doo that I
Yeah, I
can
think
find.
I've followed you on
that happened.
Instagram now or something, right?
Yeah.
I see a lot of stuff posted there.
Yeah. And then I work full time.
Oh, on top of that? I figured that was your full time.
No, I wish. I would love to do Scooby full time.
Wow.
And I have a husband and kids. So. But
Oh,
my
yeah,
kids are older.
I got some of those. Yeah. Kids are fun. This is, it's who we're making it for. It's great to see. I love making, quality content for them. There's so much out there that I would prefer they don't watch. So especially when I have control over something, like I can't tell you how many times in a meeting I was like, guys, there is no way I'm gonna put my blessing on this, because I would never show this to my kids. I don't think this should be in the world for kids.
Yeah. Awesome.
Just little things too. There's stuff that just kind of resonates in today's culture, or does not resonate in today's culture. But as we're trying to shape the youth, this is as much as everything I talked about shaped me, I know this content is going to shape them.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I'm a commission artist, so
cool.
I paint.
No way.
I paint all the time.
You painted one of these behind, right?
She actually did
Scooby
both
Panel
of
artwork.
these. There's a Scooby here too.
So was that Scooby's cousin? What's his name with the gray one?
It's not Scooby Dum though. That one's Yabadoo, who is another cousin. But yeah, we like to joke that we're like Scooby D and Yabba and Scooby on our Scooby panel. So his Cam is our resident cowboy. Cam had to be Yabadoo.
Nice.
And not Scooby Dum.
That's really cool.
And so I'm a cattle rancher. I live in Texas.
Whoa.
And
Wow.
and I run Scooby-Doo and Cameron Too, and I collect Scooby-Doo and been a big fan. So it's
which part of Texas?
So I'm about an hour and a half from Oklahoma.
Okay.
And so I live northeast Texas. I live in a small town. I've grown up here, was raised here, and I raised cattle with my father and my family. And
cool.
I love it out here. But like I said, I've grown up on Scooby-Doo since I was a baby. My mom started collecting for me, and then and other rooms.
We made a lot of Scoob and Scoob Holiday Haunt over in Texas. It was at the Real Effects in Dallas.
Oh, right on.
Yeah. So Tony spent a lot of time there. We know a lot of Texas locals. My brother lives in Texas. Yeah, it's a lot.
That's Texas cool. Yeah, Dallas is about an hour, like an hour. I think like an hour and a half somewhere from where I am. Yeah, that's cool.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, glad we're reaching such a wide audience. This is, of course, Scooby-Doo, but it's really fun. It's just to see. I went to a kid's birthday party the other day, and they had somehow caught wind of the news that our show was canceled. They were huge Scooby-Doo fans. And like I walk in with my son, and they were like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." I was like, "What? What happened?" They're like, "Scooby, we just heard." And I was like, "Oh, thank you. That's so kind." They're like, "Why?" And just just asking all these questions. But it was crazy. I mean, I texted my director, and I was just like, "Yeah, by the way, at a 4-year-old birthday party, and people are like offering their condolences and what can we do to help?" And it's a much bigger decision than us. We kind of just got pulled along in the tide of these sweeping changes at Warner Brothers, but you know, Scooby-Doo deserves to get back out there.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Somebody had
Yeah.
an idea because they had said that if Warner Brothers writes it off as a tax deduction, then it can never come out.
I don't know. Yeah, there
Somebody
might be some...
had an idea that if they like sell a snow globe of Scoob Holiday Haunt and then just give it away for free with the snow globe, that would get around the whole tax thing.
Wow. I'll mention it to my producer. Yeah, let's see. Yeah, I don't know what the legality of it all is. That's above my pay grade, but yeah, I think and a lot of us are asking those same questions, like what is possible to do once they write it off? Can you sell something that's been written off? Yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah.
I wish I knew. Yeah.
If you don't mind, I have one more question for you. I'm sorry.
Please. I got all night.
I don't want to keep
Good.
you all night, but I do have one. So I mean, what was it like working with Tony and Michael Korinsky on Scoob? I mean, did you work with them before Scoob, or did you just meet them when you did Scoob?
So no, I met Tony first on Scoob because he was co-directing with Dax. He's great. He and I mean, I hope he sees this one day, but I feel like he and I are kindred spirits in a lot of ways. We're into a lot of the same things. We have a lot of the same tastes. You know, at like little gatherings in the studios, we always had something to talk about. I remember the first one, I think Twin Peaks: The Return had just come out, and nobody had seen it. Some people who had seen it didn't know what it was, didn't understand it at all. Tony and I just loved it, just devoured it. And so we were able to just like talk about Twin Peaks. I remember on Christmas time, somebody gave him something Twin Peaks related. He like ran over to my desk. He's like, John, look at this, look what I got. And like nobody knew what it was. And I was like, oh my God, it's Dale Cooper. It's, yeah, I think for that same Christmas, I bought him a bottle of wine that the guy who plays Dale Cooper, Kyle MacLachlan, he has like a winery now. So it's like this like deep cut inside gift of like, yeah, so this is Dale Cooper's wine company now. Here you go, Merry Christmas. And oddly enough, my producer at the time, Pam Coates, went to acting school with Kyle. So she knew him personally too. And so it's this weird triangle, which, you know, it happens in the industry. Everybody knows each other somehow. But Tony's great. I mean, like I said, he's super into animation, but he's super into like everything else as well. You know, I could talk to him about all those shows and movies I listed, and we would just be there till 2 a.m. So he was great. His wife Allison's great. She's the head of Warner Animation Group. You know, she's just super sweet. She reminds me a lot of my older sister. She looks like her. She talks like her. She kind of acts like her. So I always felt the connection to her. But she's just the sweetest. And she's always championing us, the studio. You know, trying to keep us around when she can, to push us on other projects. You know, she really believes in every project. The whole environment there at Warner Brothers is a really great place to be. And then Michael Korinsky, he's basically Ted Lasso, if you guys have seen that show. And that is not an exaggeration. He literally has the Believe poster on his office, like a little wall there. Yeah, he's the closest thing to a real life Ted Lasso that I've ever encountered.
I love it.
Super positive, super energetic, always trying to find, you know, the good in everything. Super supportive. Just an absolute treat to work with. I would work with that guy for the rest of my life. And I hope I do. Yeah. But yeah,
They sound like great guys.
They were, it's, you know, it's really, it's like another family in a lot of ways, a lot of these guys there. Yeah, and he was, so they were both there on the first movie. So I kind of got to know them on the first movie, which was extended. The whole production was extended. So we got to know each other for longer than you usually do on a movie because of all the delays. You know, we basically went through 2 productions on that first one. Like there's a whole other, and actually even before I came on, there was another version of Scooby-Doo of the first movie that really never saw the light of day. That I think 1 or 2 of the story artists worked on. and, you know, I think Tony was there from the inception of it. So it was great. You know, we got to work there on the lot. This is before the pandemic. Hanging out, going to lunch. You know, every Friday we had a fun lunch. We would go to like some local restaurant or bar and just like, when we could at least, you know, take a long lunch and just hang out. Lots of parties and events. The Christmas parties at Warner Brothers are always fun. It's a good opportunity to hang out. But then the pandemic hit, and you know, everything was up in the air about what's going to happen. Can we work from home? And so I think I called Tony one day. I think I just called him asking for advice about, you know, my career. He's been with Warner's forever, so I was like, you know, how did you do it? This and that. Just asking him some kind of advice and tips. And in that conversation, he mentioned he was making another Scooby movie. And so we kind of got the ball rolling there. I forget if it was that conversation or soon after, he mentioned, you know, I'd actually like to reach out to you and me about being the head of story on it. And then he mentioned Michael Krinsky is the production designer right now in development. And he's, at the time, I think he was maybe going to direct it, but maybe Michael was going to direct it as well. It ended up being that Michael co-directed with Bill, who is also a great guy. He's in Dallas though, so I only saw him a couple times when he came out here for various reasons. But you know, we'd all go out to these old Hollywood restaurants and have dinner and steak and drinks, you know, talk until the wee hours of the morning. But yeah, it's just a really good crew, really good group of people. Yeah, who else is around there? Oh yeah, Tony and Mike. Our producer, Mitch, he came from a live action side of things, so it was really cool to have somebody who's kind of not used to animation, who I think in a lot of ways really helped ground the project, and really, you know, he had to play logic police a lot of the times, which for people in animation I think could be a little frustrating because they're like, come on, it's a cartoon, whatever. He's like, no, this needs to make sense. Which me, coming from my sort of tilt toward live action, I really appreciate it, because I think a lot of animated shows are just like, it's for kids, who cares? You know, it's fine. Oh, the villain, he's just a bad guy. It's like, no, we gotta like give them a real motivation. Like we have to make their argument almost as convincing as the hero's argument, so that the audience is really feeling that tug and pull. You know, it's like in Raiders, like you hear what Belloc has to say and you're like, yeah, he's kind of right. You know, everything he says, like there's just a little tweak where he's wrong. And but you know, there's that great scene in Raiders where he talks about that. You know, he's like, you're a shadowy reflection of me, or whatever the line was. Anyway, another tangent, but it was great to have somebody like Mitch there to sort of rein this in. He had just come off, I think, well, he worked on Master and Commander, and he worked on a couple other shows for Netflix. Oh, he worked on that Scorsese movie. He was like a visual effects guy. So what was that Scorsese movie where they made them all young again? The Irishman. Did you guys see that? Okay.
Oh,
well, there's this movie with like De Niro and Joe Pesci and all the Goodfellas era Godfather guys, and they had flashbacks in the movie. And so Mitch was in charge of sort of the de-aging process. It's funny because I remember hearing about Mitch without knowing it was Mitch on the first Scoob, because Tony was friends with them. That they go way back. There's this great video of them on YouTube. There's a Star Wars, is it Phantom Menace promo, maybe, or the re-release, and they like pan through a crowd. And so for anybody who wants to find some fun Tony Cervoni history, you can find Tony and Mitch standing in the crowd to watch Star Wars in line. Yeah.
And that's cool.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's a good group of people. It's great to find like a team of people that you really click with and connect with, especially after, you know, from working on Scoob 1 to working on Scoob 2. You know, we had all these restrictions with the budget and with, you know, the amount of time we had, and we had, you know, so we weren't able to like create a lot of new assets and stuff. So we had to borrow some things from the first movie. But having such a shorthand with the people that you work with is just, it's why you see a lot of these productions, it's not just nepotism and, you know, these people know those people. It's really like those people work well together, and so they're going to do it again and again and again, because it makes the production easier, and it just works. You know, that's why I like Spielberg and Kathleen Kennedy, and you know, even the actors involved. You'll see eras of certain groups of people. Like Tim Burton used Johnny Depp forever, and then Johnny Depp and Helena Bonham Carter, and you know, he always uses Danny Elfman. Spielberg always uses John Williams. Like there's a reason for that. You know, it's the same kind of connections that I've experienced working in studios. It doesn't always happen. When you find it, you need to, you know, hold on to it, and really fight to keep it alive.
Well, I hope you get to work on more Scooby-Doo movies up in the future.
Yeah,
you know, I know there's a lot of direct movies, so I hope you get to work.
Yeah,
on
who knows? Yeah, Scoob 3 or a sequel to the first one. Yeah, it'd be fun.
That's awesome.
Because this one's kind of a sneakquel. It's like, you know, we get to see them as kids when they first meet on Halloween in the first movie, and this movie takes place in between that and the rest of the movie. So yeah, it's kind of a sequel, kind of a prequel. Sequel. Let's just call it that.
That's great.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to tell us? Any other stories that you have?
I don't know. I mean, yeah. Do you guys have any other like just questions about working at studios or Scooby or anything you guys, or your audience might be curious to hear? Or?
One comment that I have about Scoob was when they turned Scooby into Super Scooby and they removed his collar.
Yes.
I cried.
Oh, thank you.
It was so sad. Like just the look on Scooby's face and Shaggy just being so sad because in the beginning he said he would never take his collar off, and then they took it off. Yeah, I shed a couple tears.
That means a lot to me personally because I helped storyboard that sequence.
Whoa.
So thank you. Yeah, I remember drawing that and like, you know, getting into those expressions and the whole moment, the pacing of it, and like looking down and do I do this? You know, Scooby feels kind of lighthearted about it. Like, well, I guess this is what we do. You know, I'm becoming a superhero now, and sure, take my collar off. He feels a little weird about it, but to Shaggy, it's like, you've never taken that off ever. You said you never would. Yeah. And they also got to board the sequence following that, where Blue Falcon comes up and just acts like a total idiot. It was really fun. Just completely oblivious, handing him like a care package that's all about him. And yeah, that was a fun character to work on. As much as he kind of stole the movie away from the main storyline about the kids, he was so fun. And then once we got Mark Wahlberg to do the voice, he just took it to another level. It was perfect. Yeah, we had one of our film editors did the scratch for him, so we all got used to that. And then we heard Mark Wahlberg's take, and it was just like, oh, this is just gold. Yeah. But yeah, that's really sweet. I'm glad you appreciated that. That means a lot.
Yeah, it was very emotional, that scene. So you did a great job.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah. What do you guys have favorite moments from Scoob? The other than
I just love their hug at the end.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
There's there's obviously people take still images from the video and stuff, but just like the look on everyone's face, like everyone's got their eyes closed and they're all just like hugging each other. It's like such an iconic moment. And because we do all love classic Scooby-Doo, and we're very particular about how newer iterations handle him. And I just feel like in that moment, the way that was done, like that's our gang from the classic Scooby, where they just love each other, you know, and they're just friends and there's nothing that they wouldn't do for each other. And like that, for me, that was my favorite. It's just
that's great. I'll have to tell that was storyboarded by a guy called Patrick Collins, who's an amazing story artist. He won't admit it, but he is the best draftsman I've ever seen. And he is just, he doesn't think he is, but Patrick, you are. And it was it was intimidating working with you. But yeah, no, he was great at that kind of stuff. I mean, he could do it all, Patrick. I think he's the head of story now on another project. But yeah, he really could get those emotional beats. He had a lot of really good eye acting. You know, you mentioned like the eyes were closed. That was all timed out. That's all in his storyboards. And yeah, it's great to see that all come to life. Yeah, it's a sweet moment.
I think my favorite scene is when in the end, when, you know, one of them has to go through the gate, you know what I mean? And
yes,
they have to, yeah. And they have to, you know, Scooby the paw and then the hand. And we were talking the other day, we were doing a panel when we were talking about the friendship between Shaggy and Scooby and how it's just so iconic through, you know, music and movies and TV. I mean, everybody talks about Scooby and Shaggy, you know? So that, I think that scene was my favorite. And, you know, I mean, during the pandemic, we were all like us three, and I know a lot of other people, we bought our like our digital codes, or, you know, we bought it online, or, you know, to get ready to watch it. Yeah. But I remember when they released it, they released it for like a week in theaters, like on different places. And so I drove about an hour and a half to a theater that was showing it. And when I got there, the whole theater was packed to see Scoob. Yes. And everybody was cheering. I mean, really? That's what I wanted, because it was so great. Because when I got in there, it was, you know, there was little kids and there was grown adults, and everybody was just like, you know, oh, you know, when there was, you know, those scenes and laughing and clapping and cheering. But, you know, to see it on the big screen, it was just, it took me back, because when I was little, my mom took me to the first Scooby-Doo, and then to Scooby-Doo 2 Monsters Unleashed, because I remember I got a ticket I won the ticket to Scooby-Doo 2 Monsters Unleashed in a drawing contest I did. And so I remember when I went and saw it, I was just in theater, like my whole family fell asleep because they're not big Scooby-Doo fans like I am. I'm like, did you see that? Did you see that? So like I drugged my mom with me. I'm like, come on, we got to go see Scoob. And she was like, that was an excellent Scooby. I'm like, I'm telling you. Yeah. So it was, I mean, to see it on really TV, great. It was great, but to actually be like with people in the theater and seeing it on the big screen, it was such a fun experience, you know?
And you know, that's an experience I've never had. I've never been able to see Scoob, because here in LA, they didn't put it in theaters. It was only streaming.
Really?
So aside from a cut of the film that was very much incomplete, still storyboards and rough CG animation, I've never seen it with a full audience, and I wish I had. So it's so rewarding to hear that people responded that way. That's
oh,
great.
They loved it.
As far as I know, it just slipped out into the ether, and I don't know what happened to it. You know, I assume people watched it on streaming. I heard it was in theaters, but I've never. This is the first. That's really great, man.
Yeah,
that's super cool.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, I hope we can make that happen for the next one, because it's a fun sneakquel.
Yeah. I have kind of a general Scooby question for you.
Please, let's see if I can answer it.
A lot of people. This will determine whether or not we can be friends. I'm just joking. That was a joke. Are you yes or no to Scrappy? Did you watch much with Scrappy? Do you have feelings for Scrappy?
People have like a love-hate relationship with Scrappy.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I can properly comment on it, because I don't know. I mean, I watched a lot for research, but we were explicitly told, like, don't include Scrappy. Okay. So like, I didn't expose myself to it. I saw him, I know who he is. From what I understand, a lot of people think he's kind of like a pest in the franchise in a lot of ways.
But yeah.
Is that right? Yeah. So
Nikki's the only anti-Scrappy.
Is he like your favorite? Or
Cam and I love Scrappy.
We love Scrappy. And then Nikki's like, he's just a bully. And I'm like,
well, I hope you made a lot of Scrappy-Doo puns when our film got scrapped.
Oh, I see what you did.
And if you haven't yet, you're welcome.
Oh, thank you. We'll have to do that.
Scrappy-Doo, yeah. Yeah, he has like all sorts of other cousins and brothers, relatives. Wait, I heard a theory that Scooby-Doo is actually an alien. Do you guys know about this?
Oh my gosh, I heard about that.
Have you heard this?
Yes.
There's some episode or something that like gets into his history, and I think actually on the first movie we tried to capitalize on it a little bit for a brief period of time, that he actually had like otherworldly origins. In fact, Scoob, the original Scoob, the reason it's called Scoob and not Scooby was because it was something to do with the origin of who he was, because he wasn't just any dog, he was a special dog. And I think it had to do with something off-world, because he got involved in an organization that was called, I'm gonna butcher this, it was like the Secret Society of Otherworldly Beings, Scoob, right?
Oh.
And so it was S period, C period, O period, O period, B period. And like, yeah, it was a whole thing. And so that idea didn't survive, but the I'm looking at the poster here on the wall, the Scoob without the Y somehow stayed. I don't know why, but yeah, so we did try to play into that from what I recall.
Okay.
Tony would be able to answer that much better than I could.
Right on. Okay, I got one question, and I promise I will be done asking questions.
No,
for
yeah,
you tonight,
go ahead.
because I think the fandom would really like to know this. When you guys did Scoob, was there any mention, like when y'all were working on it? Because there's a love for Scooby Dum and Scooby D. Did they ever get mentioned to be even in, like, maybe just even to be put in the movie, or even just got brought up? Or
I don't know. Not on the version I worked on, but
Okay.
like I mentioned, the version before us had a lot of extra dog characters, and I think some of the other Scooby-Doos and Dums and Don'ts, they were all talked about, at least, I think.
that's awesome.
I don't know if Scrappy was ever in there. Yeah. I kind of remember something storyboards with like who's like his cousin. He was kind of like a country yokel version of Scooby.
Yabadoo?
Yeah, Yabadoo.
That I think maybe he was in there a bit.
Okay.
That's really
Yeah.
cool to hear.
I think maybe. Don't quote me on that.
I got you. Well, thank you for answering that. I do appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
Is there anything that you would have changed about Scoob?
The first
If you-
movie,
Mhm.
yes, and there was lots I tried to change, but I couldn't do as a story artist. You know, we're just kind of a little bit more than a cog in the machine as a story artist. But yeah, there was a lot of let's see. I think there was the potential for like 2 separate movies in that movie that I think, you know, that they all kind of ended up in the movie. So I think 2 things. I would have either suggested to make it 2 movies, you know, to have a mystery with the gang that leads them to finding Dastardly and what he's up to. And then another movie sort of about the other stuff in there with Blue Falcon and all that. Like it would have been great if their mission to take down Dastardly sort of put them on the radar of the Blue Falcon, right? So that by the end of the movie, the Blue Falcon's like a little bit involved, and he's like, hey, you guys are useful. And then it's sort of like the button at the end of the movie that sets up the sequel, that they're going to go on a mission with Blue Falcon, you know. And, you know, a lot of us in the story team pitched versions of the movie when it was pretty early on, when we could have changed stuff. And, you know, we pitched that, we pitched the reverse of that, we pitched all sorts of alternate versions of the movie. So I would have either done that or suggested that we make the movie longer to accommodate for the 2 stories. Because the one pitfall that I had from a story perspective was that I wished the grandeur of that story had more time to service that story. You know, you look at these films that have multiple complete narratives in them, and they're all over 2 hours, like Empire Strikes Back or Raiders of the Lost Ark. Like there's 2 distinct stories in each of those films, and they have the time for it. You know, I think even Frozen, if I'm not mistaken, the first one or the second one, one of those 2 is a pretty long film. There's another movie that just came out that was also a long animated kids food film, and it too had two distinct narratives, and they gave it the time. So yeah, just coming from a pure story point of view, I think that's that's what I would have done. There was a lot of gags that we wanted to throw in there that maybe wouldn't have done well with studio execs, MPAA, and all that we would have loved to get in there, but we couldn't. But you know, overall, we're pretty happy with the way Scoob turned out. It did well enough to order a sequel, and it kept the franchise alive. And obviously, you guys loved it, regardless of what nitpicky behind-the-scenes stuff I had with it. But that's every movie. I mean, every movie we ever work on is at a certain point you just kind of stop making changes and finish it and release it. It's just sort of the name of the game. I mean, you talk to any director who's worked on anything, they'll be like, oh yeah, like the greatest movie of all time, you know, they'll be like, yeah, but that one scene, if I could tweak that, you're like, what do you mean? It's a masterpiece, it's perfect. And they're like, no, it could have been better.
I just want to go watch Scoob again, to be honest.
Oh,
That's what
yeah.
I want to do
I
right
haven't seen it in a long time. You know, you kind of work on it, and then, you know, I was on it for, gosh, what, 4 years, 4+ years in total. And yeah, I had enough at the time, but I'm sure coming up soon, I can watch it again, maybe. We'll see. It's hard watching something you've worked on, because you see all the seams, you know, you know what it took to make that. You sort of remember the production. You remember, yeah, not necessarily, you're not like lost in the film. Yeah, I keep bringing up Spielberg, but I think he mentioned that the only film of his that he can actually just sit back and watch is Raiders of the Lost Ark. I think that that's the only one where he's like, yeah, I could just sit back and watch it like a movie and forget that I made it. Which, you know, is obviously a huge testament to that film. It's a masterpiece. But yeah, it's a tough thing to do. There's very, very few things I can do. Scoob Holiday Haunt, I've caught myself watching the reels, and I'm just watching a movie. It's fun. It's the closest thing I've had to it. Sorry to keep like promoting something you're never going to see.
No, you're
Never
good.
say never. We're not
Yeah.
giving up.
That's right. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully we'll see that one. We were all excited for it. I
Yeah.
mean,
Had you guys heard rumblings of it? Like, I know there was a couple interviews that Tony gave. They must have released the fact that we were making it, or what have you guys heard about it outside of, or prior to the announcement that it got shelved?
that it was going to be better than Scoob.
Yes,
I heard,
can
I think Michael
confirm.
Karinsky actually said that it would
Yeah.
be better than Scoob.
And it really is. I mean, that's not just industry fluff. Like, it really is better than Scoob. So I have these friends who are also in the film industry. They have a big family. They're all super sharp, really knowledgeable about film. And so I made sure they were invited to the screenings that we have, like the test audiences, because I knew they would give legit feedback. And so they saw the first one, and they gave legit feedback, and they didn't change anything. And then the second one, they came and they watched it, and they came up to me afterward. They're like, dude, night and day. Like, holy cow, how did you guys do this? Like, it's just leagues above the first one. Like, you know, the first one was fine, but like, wow, this is a good movie. Michael's right. It's way better than the first one. It looks better than the first one. The characters, we redesigned them. They're more appealing. The story's a lot better. It has this great thread of like heart through the movie. There's one thing, actually, going back to that prior question about something I would change. I felt like the first movie didn't have enough of a classic Scooby-Doo mystery. And as much as we've fought to get it in there, it sort of got overshadowed by the superhero aspect. Because at the time, the studio wanted to launch the Hanna-Barbera universe, right? And Scoob was going to be the flagship for that. And they have all the HB properties they want to do something with. And so they were sort of taking the DC approach of like, let's make Justice League first. We're all like, but Marvel made Iron Man first, and then Thor and Hulk, and they sort of teased it out, and that's why people love it. They're like, no, Justice League, everything at once. You're like, well, okay, but you might not get the response you're looking for. So yeah, it was yeah, it'd be good to get that mystery in there.
It was cool when we watched Space Jam: A New Legacy. It was cool to see like Scooby-Doo and the gang, how they drove the mystery machine, like
That's
to,
right.
like, the actual
Yeah.
gang.
There's
and
an
like the
Easter egg.
Jetsons and the Flintstones.
Yeah.
So we saw a lot of the actual Hanna-Barbera
Right.
characters in there.
Yeah, all the IPs. Was the what was the button on that movie? Did that make there was like a little stinger at the end of the film after the credits. Was that still in there, or was that just an earlier cut? I don't want to say it if it's not in there.
I you know what? I didn't watch after credits for
Okay.
Space Jam, to be
There
honest
might
with
be
you.
something after the credits on Space Jam, but it basically, what I'm driving at is it alludes to that sort of expanding the Hanna-Barbera universe, sort of
That's
the
awesome.
merging of the Looney Tunes universe with the Hanna-Barbera universe, and that,
Oh wow.
you know, like it was no mistake that Space Jam, part of the plot was to go into every Warner Brothers IP, because they wanted to create this universe where the characters intermingle and, you know, just re-expose everybody to all these old classic IPs and franchises.
Mhm.
So yeah, it was definitely, you know, the studio's directive to revisit these worlds and to give little glimmers of these characters, because there's more is coming.
Well, I'm enjoying talking to you so much. So I gotta say, I heard like a rumor, because okay, like in Space Jam, you know how like, and spoilers, people, if you've even, you need to see it. It's already been
If you
out.
haven't seen Space Jam, it's too late.
Yeah, it's too late. You got come on, people, get with the ball. But in there, like you see how like Bugs Bunny is going with LeBron James, and they're going to pick up all the Looney Tunes.
Yeah.
Well, I heard, and maybe you can confirm this or not, but I heard there was a scene cut out where Gossamer was being chased by the Scooby-Doo gang, because you know Gossamer was that Looney Tunes monster.
Yeah.
And so he was being chased by the Scooby-Doo gang, and then finally Bugs Bunny and then picked him up before the Scooby-Doo gang came.
That might have happened. Yeah.
Really?
Maybe.
That's
I mean,
cool.
there's, like I said, like there's so many iterations of things that never make it to the film.
Yeah.
I kind of have a vague memory that happened.
I
That was
swear-
like a rumor floating around that used to be in there.
I swear I saw a picture, and it was kind of
Picture.
like
Oh.
it was kind of like Gossamer, and I could be wrong. I mean, but like I said, I
mean,
think
Gossamer
it was
was in the movie, yeah.
Yeah, but I think it was Gossamer, and he was in a corner, and then it was like the Scooby-Doo outline of the gang, and it was like a flashlight shining at him. I think something like that. And then so they
Maybe.
were like, this was cut from the film Space Jam, and I was like, whoa, that's really
I'll tell
cool.
you, there was countless gags and situations and movies that were cut from that sequence.
Really?
We explored so many different movies and cartoon shows. Is the Casablanca one still in there at the end? They had that, right?
I think I can't
Didn't
remember.
Yosemite Sam
Yes,
playing the piano in the Casablanca
and Elmer
set.
was in there with
Yeah.
them. Or no, Elmer. I'm sorry, Elmer was in the the
So
Austin
that
Powers.
was part of what used to be a whole bigger sequence.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, the movie kind of went through different, I don't know how much I'm allowed to say, but like it went through different iterations of how they explore those IPs. So the Casablanca thing used to be bigger, I'll say that. So big, in fact, that I had the luxury of wandering onto the set one day where they had recreated the set from Casablanca in full, including some of the original props from the original
Whoa.
movie. Like they created Rick's Bar or whatever it's called. And you walk in and you're like, I am walking into a piece of Hollywood history right now.
That's
It
awesome.
was incredible. And then right on the other side was the throne from Game of Thrones, like in the same soundstage.
That's
Wow.
cool.
Yeah. But yeah, there's a lot of different movies and a lot of things that we wanted to do that for licensing reasons we ended up couldn't do, or it's too expensive to do or something. Or just things that were challenging to do, like certain franchises like Harry Potter, it's very tricky to get proper licensing for that. I think we ended up with a Harry Potter joke, right? Didn't we have that in Space Jam?
Yeah, I think so. I think there was a Harry Potter
Where
joke.
he went near Harry Potter world and found
Yes,
his house or
yes, like
something.
yes,
Yeah,
because they were flying on that spaceship and they were seeing all the different worlds and everything they could have gone to, the properties and stuff.
Yep.
But one interesting thing that I think you said so far is I love how you said like at the end, like the Looney Tunes kind of merging in with the Hanna-Barbera characters, because we were talking about that the other day. Like we really haven't seen like an interaction with like Bugs Bunny and Scooby-Doo. So like fingers crossed we can maybe get to see interaction between the two one day, because they're both such, you know what I mean, they're icons in today's history. So
yeah, that would be fun. I mean, technically they were on the same stage in Space Jam there.
Yeah,
Bugs is playing the game and they were in the background.
Yeah, I'm watching.
And those were the models from Scoob too.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
did you put them in there? Did you draw Scoob and them in the background? If you
no, you know, I think from what I understand that the company that handled the visual effects in that movie, it was one of those things where they asked for those assets to sneak them in as an Easter egg.
That's awesome.
I'm sure they got the approval of our directors and everybody, I'm sure.
Right on.
Yeah, but yeah, there's a lot of characters in there. A lot of stuff from upcoming projects that were in that crowd rushing the court.
It's so cool.
Yeah, Space Jam, that was a fun one. Again, another surreal thing. I thought I never imagined I would work on. You know, growing up, I saw Space Jam as a kid. Not only to work with the people who made Space Jam, but to then go ahead and do the sequel and be one of the main story artists on it was surreal.
That's awesome. It was a great film. It really was.
Thanks. Yeah. That was a tough one, but we got through it.
Funko is releasing a cross between Scooby-Doo and Looney Tunes.
Oh, is that right?
So
like
I'm wondering if we're going to see. Yeah, it's
like
supposed to
Shaggy
be
with
like,
rabbit ears.
I think it's, isn't it?
It's the Looney Tunes.
Looney Tunes
dressed
like them
as the gang.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. Like
yeah,
they're cosplaying as Scooby and the gang.
So Bugs is dressed as Fred in the Mystery Machine, and then Lola is Daphne, and then Tweety is Velma, and then Daphne is Scooby, or excuse me, Daphne is Shaggy, and then the Tasmanian Devil Scooby. Wow. So it'd be fun to see what they look like.
That's cool. Yeah, those crossovers are always fun. Yeah. I don't know if there's anything on the books yet, but I'm sure it's because there's the Warner Animation Group that does the films, and there's also Warner Brothers Animation, which is like the TV side of things that also produce some features. So they might be cooking something up that I'm not even aware of. Yeah, that'd be fun.
Right on.
Yeah.
Are there any things that you guys as fans often like ask or wonder about that maybe I could help answer, or like about Scooby or about movies, or anything that like you guys that consistently comes up, or you're always been curious about? Or
I think one thing we asked you about was like Scrappy and Scooby-Doo and Scooby-Doo. You know, we've always, and like I said, I know we kind of already talked about that, but we've always wondered as fans why in the Scooby-Doo franchise, while they will introduce a character, but they won't bring them back in the future. So like they'll have them, like, I mean, for example, take Scooby-Doo. He was literally like in 3 episodes of the Scooby-Doo show. Yeah, he was loved by so many fans, but we never saw him again, like ever saw him again. And then Scooby-Doo had 1 episode. Scrappy had a little bit of a run. But you know, we always talked about that. Why the Scooby-Doo franchise, and like I said, not criticizing, just wondering why the Scooby-Doo franchise would bring a character but never bring him back. Just we always wondered that.
I don't know for sure, but just speculating. I would say that you know, a couple of ways you could look at that. One is that, you know, at the time they probably were just, you know, needed new material and new characters, and so they created a character that was fun to watch, that they put their whole effort into to make really memorable and iconic, as you're bringing him up here today, but was never designed for longevity, and that they never, and especially at the time, never imagined that anybody would want to see him again. They probably treated him like a guest star. You know,
I hear you.
It's like, well, why are you going to bring back a guest star over and over and over again? But you know, he's since become a cult classic, and that's one way to look at it. If they were aware at the time, you know, there's an old filmmaking technique is that you always want to leave the audience leaving just think that they want just a little bit more. And that's intentional. You know, you tell a complete story so that you're satisfied that this story has been told from start to finish, but at the end you kind of want to leave something not open-ended, but some sort of unresolved bit of business that you're okay with being unresolved in terms of the story or the episode, that leaves you wanting a little more. You know, it's the same reason why at the end of all the Marvel movies they have a hook,
like a little cliffhanger,
a little cliffhanger, a little new character that pops up. And you know, one of my favorite movies of all time, Back to the Future, they did that very successfully. So successfully that they made 2 other movies. But at the time, Doc showing up at the end with a time machine from the future and flying, it was just a joke. It was just a gag. It was a fun way to end the movie. And, you know, once Back to the Future was such a huge success, as I have heard, they had to start with that to create the second one and then ultimately the third one. But yeah, a lot of times that kind of decision making is on purpose to generate exactly the feeling you're feeling right now, where you want to see that character.
That's good. I never looked at it like that. So thank you.
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that I actually wish happened more often. To be honest, I wish a lot of the times productions just wrap up a show or a series with a pretty little bow and it's all done. And the key example of the difference between those 2 things is the first Star Wars movie and the second Star Wars movie. Star Wars, A New Hope, as they call it now. At the end, everything's done. The Death Star blows up. The Empire seems gone. They have an awards ceremony. They literally put a bow on it, you know, and it's finished and it has nowhere to go. You know, I get, you know, eagle-eyed observers will be like, "Oh, Vader's still alive. You know, he wasn't killed. He was just shot off." But really, it's done. Versus Empire Strikes Back, which very much ends on a cliffhanger, where the story is told, the film is complete, and you're satisfied that it is, but there's more to tell. And you know, had they never made another one, it still would have had that same feeling. You would have still wanted a little bit more. You know, all the great series. I don't know what age your audience typically is, but like series like Breaking Bad, which if you guys are young, we'll see when you're older. The way that ends is just, it's so satisfying, but then you want a little bit more. You know, it's just, you know, it's great. And that's, you know, to me, that's a big part of storytelling.
I hear you.
Wrapping it up with a hook. Yeah.
That's a good way of looking at it.
Yeah, a little insider.
So what are your thoughts on Shaggy being a stoner?
Oh, I love it. It's great. I think is he officially a stoner, or is that just like one of the things the fans have added on? Or?
It's just one of those theories that people say that because he eats so much and he's super skinny and he's always hungry that he's a stoner.
He always has the munchies. They totally nodded to that, alluded to it in the film, didn't they? In the first live action film, they were hotboxing that car, right? I seem to remember a scene where that happened. It definitely every parody they've always done. Wasn't there something in? Was it one of those Kevin Smith movies, Clerks or Clerks 2? Where they get picked up by the Scooby Gang and they're all super stoned. And, yeah, it's great. I think it's great. I think it's, you know, the show was made in the 60s. It's so fitting and it's really subtle. It's one of those things for the parents. So they're like, oh, look at these 2 stoner teenagers, the stoner kid and his stoner dog. Yeah.
Lord.
I think it's great. Yeah. I'm all for the implication that they are stoners. In fact, there was multiple times in the film where little things happened in this new one. We were like, is this it? Is this the moment where Scooby gets, or where Shaggy gets a taste of of like, hey, like, what is this? Is this like a I give it away, like a drug related thing that's really subtle that you think like, okay, this is where it begins. I think it made it into the final cut. It might have been. The studio loves cutting stuff like that. But yeah, I don't remember.
So I have a question about story writing.
Yeah.
I'll see if I can ask it the way that it makes sense in my head.
Mm-hmm.
Whose idea is it what the movie's going to be about? So is it that like, let's just, for example, take Scooby-Doo Holiday Haunt because it's something that was current. Did Warner Brothers say, we want a new Scooby movie, now somebody pitch us an idea? Or did they say, we want to do a Christmas themed Scooby, now go and write it?
So I don't know the full story, but yes to the studio ordering the movie, but also yes to somebody pitching the movie. It's kind of an organic process. A lot of projects are developed in our development wing, and the studio is very much involved, but the people in development kind of go into blue sky mode and come up with all sorts of versions and iterations, and they pitch it, they go, no, more like this. They're very vague, the studio, and then you go make something else and they're like, I don't like that either, try again. And so there's a little back and forth interplay. But yeah, sometimes the studio will want something very specific. I don't know, I wish I could answer this. I don't know the history exactly of how Scoob happened. What I do know as far as the writing of it is that I believe, and he can correct me if I'm wrong, that Tony came up with the basic concept for it, and that his good friend Paul Dini, who's written tons of Batman properties and comic books and the animated series, penned the first draft of the script, and that they, workshopped a lot of it, and then it got into our hands, we workshopped it. It's one of those things where it starts with the idea, with the treatment, with the first draft script, and then it just goes through endless iterations, passing through many hands, internally among the crew, and then the executives take a peek at it, give their notes, and it's just a back and forth, very organic process. Kind of designed by committee, but there's definitely people at the helm steering the ship, if that makes sense. In contrast with an independent production where somebody would have, a vision for a film, find a buyer to finance their vision. And, they have more creative control to an extent, within, restraints. Like Spielberg made Jaws, the Jaws that he wanted to make, but then there was lots of constraints from the studio, and at a certain point there's what do you call them, test screenings, and from what I hear, like the original Jaws, they didn't blow the shark up at the end of the movie in the first cut, and it's just like, what, how did you end it? And it was just this kind of lackluster ending. And they realized very quickly, like, oh, hold on, we need a big explosion. We need to show this shark getting literally blown up. Otherwise, audiences aren't going to respond. So yeah, things like that. It's a process from start to finish, really. I mean, like I said earlier, you'd be surprised at how slapped together these things are, and how things that seem like they were planned out were really just like quick 11th hour decisions where our hand was forced. And yeah, but when it works, it works.
Yeah.
Makes it look like we know what we were doing. A lot of times we do. A lot of times we don't.
Do you guys get any leeway at all with the length of the movie? Like, I'm assuming that the studio says, this is the length that we need the movie to be an hour and a half or 2 hours or an hour or whatever. And if you're like, well, you gave us an hour and 30, but if we can make it so much better, an hour and 35, is the studio like, no, cut it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%.
Oh.
They're like, It's going to be 82 minutes exactly. You know, you have
Gosh.
no more, no less. It has to be 82 minutes, which is, it's good, you know, in a way. It's like you don't want to. It's actually bad to have like free range to just let the film be, unless the story really demands. Like I said earlier, I really think Scoob should have been longer, or 2 movies, but having those restraints forces you to make creative decisions that actually end up making the product so much better. It doesn't seem like it at the time, and it's very frustrating. But what ends up happening is you get you know that ton of pressure. You're under the gun, and you're just forced to come up with a solution that works for the production, that also works for the film, and it ends up just being this fun puzzle to solve. And a lot of times you don't. A lot of times you don't solve it. The movie's terrible, but when you do solve it, it's so satisfying because it just everything falls into place. But yeah, there's definitely time constraints for a multitude of reasons, and you have to abide by them. And you definitely, films are always, they're very seldom too short. They're almost always like 2-3 times as long as they need to be in those first few cuts, right? Like I heard something crazy, like the first cut of Dances with Wolves was 9 hours long.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Golly.
Right? It's crazy.
Oh.
And you know, and sometimes you get to see these extended cuts, and sometimes they're cool, and sometimes you're like, yeah, they really needed to be cut down.
Right.
You know, like King Kong, Peter Jackson's King Kong is long enough as it is. And then there's the extended cut. You're just like, dude, slow down,
Yeah.
DJ, like the trim.
Yeah.
You could still trim. You could cut an hour out of that film and it would be great.
Right.
It makes me think of the Justice League and and then they released a Snyder cut, which was like, what was
I never
it, like
saw that.
five or 6
right?
hours?
My
Me and
gosh.
my mom, we were like, we're gonna watch this, and we were like, oh my god, it's 5 or 6
Yeah.
hours long.
Right. That's like those the Lord of the Rings extended cuts, which as a Tolkien fan, as somebody who loves the book, I really appreciated a lot of what they threw back in there. From a filmmaker point of view, there's a lot that didn't need to be in there. I wish there was like a somewhere in the middle cut. But yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, God, it doesn't need to be that long. That is one of the rare stories though, where there's so much story, there's so much intricacies and complete narratives in that one work that it demands the length. You know, and that's kind of the only reason why you should make a movie that long. It's when there's a multiple story form in there. You know, there's been some great movies, like the Sound of Music has 2 story forms in there. You know, there's the whole Nazis invading Austria and taking over story interlaced with the story of Maria coming to be the new what do you call it? Not Baroness. That was the other character. The new, what do you call that? She watches after the kids.
Yeah. The fancy word for nanny.
That thing. Yeah. So there's those 2 stories, and they work in tandem. They reflect each other in some ways, but it's definitely 2 stories, and that's why that movie's 3 hours long with an intermission. You know, all those movies, Lawrence of Arabia and Dr. Zhivago, these great films, they just have so much going on that you need the time. But they shouldn't be any longer than that, or as much as they shouldn't be any shorter than that.
Right.
Yeah, these are great questions, by the way. Thank you.
Yeah, that reminds me. I think you're right. How sometimes the limit can be a blessing, because like any form of art, you do get to a point where you're like, okay, it has to be done. I have to say it's finished. You know, you could work on a painting your entire life and keep adding to it and keep changing it, but at some point, you have to just pick an end and stick to it. I think the quote is attributed to Da Vinci. I don't know if he actually said this or not, but it's attributed to him. Paintings are never finished, only abandoned.
Yeah, I've heard
because
that.
you could always keep going with it.
That's
I
true.
know I'm a huge fan of original Twilight Zone. And Rod Serling originally wanted a 1-hour show, and CBS said no. All they would give him was the half-hour slot. And he ended up getting the hour-long slot in season 4. And while those episodes are still great,
Yeah.
they're bloated.
Yeah, for sure.
It's his half-hour work that has withstood the test of time. Those season 4 ones are often forgotten by fans because they are just like, they didn't need to be that long. He managed to pull it together in that 30-minute period, and it's magic. So yeah, sometimes it is good.
And it's interesting thing you bring that up, because somebody like Rod, who's just so great at what he does, he's so well educated and affluent, and just like a creative force to be reckoned with, and really groundbreaking at the time. Nobody was doing what he did, and there hadn't really been a show like that before. To have such a creative mindset, you tend to lose sight of the other side of the coin, which is the audience appreciation of what you're doing, and their tolerance levels, their expectation levels, and just sort of the bigger picture of the zeitgeist, and just what studio executives are really good at, which, as much as we gripe about the decisions they force us into, they're very good at knowing what's going to sell, what's going to work, what's not. That's their forte, and I'm sure there's a dance between us, but they are definitely not wrong about a lot of those sort of calls, and that shows evidence of that. As soon as look at the Star Wars prequels, as soon as you gave George Lucas full creative control, just unwatchable, a lot of those. It's there's a lot of great stuff in there, but very, very bad stuff in there, and way too long. So yeah, sort of limiting. There's an old John Cleese lecture, John Cleese from Monty Python. He gave a great lecture, maybe you guys have seen it, that it used to be floating around YouTube, but they might have taken it down, about his principles of creativity. And part of that was he sees creativity as playtime. And just like any game, a game has a definite start and a definite end. In most sports, at least, you start the game at 1 p.m. and it runs, and there's a timer, and once the timer's out, the game is done, and you stop playing the game. And when creatives don't put those sort of limitations on themselves, but it doesn't have to be a time limit, but just some sort of limitations, you end up just spinning and spinning and spinning and overworking something until you kind of ruin it or make it bloated, and then you have to rein it back in. So yeah, constraints are good. Constraints are a good thing. I can't tell you how many authors that I've seen interviews with that are like, I only work 3 hours a day. And I wouldn't work more than that if I could. Just because of that same mindset that, like, okay, here's my playtime. I want to go play in the sandbox. I'm done. That's it. I'm gonna go live my life. Yeah. And yeah, it does wonders for the creative process too, because your mind subconsciously solves things in that downtime. And that's another thing he mentions in his lectures, is that if you don't put in those 3 hours, you'll never solve the problem. Right. But I'm sure we've all experienced, you put in the work, whatever it is you're doing, and then later you're driving the car in the shower or something, you're just like, oh, of course, that's it, because the back of your mind has been going the whole time. And so some guys build their whole career over that, like David Lynch. He is all about tapping into the subconscious. He does the transcendental meditation, which is just about, let's just go straight to that point, see what's there, and I'll go fishing and pull it out. And it's there's really something to that whole creative process, putting those parameters around it. So yeah, it translates to the studio system and working on Scooby-Doo.
When, not if, but when WB says, yes, everyone can watch Scoob Holiday Haunt, will you come back on after everyone has seen it and have like a nice little
Yeah,
host a party with us.
Absolutely. I'd be honored to come back and expand on everything I couldn't say now. It'll happen. It'll happen.
It will.
It will happen.
It will happen. Yes.
Maybe that'll be maybe we'll get it for Christmas. Maybe that's what they're doing.
Christmas
They're like, we're
miracle.
going to give it to them for Christmas. Your Christmas miracle. There you go.
Merry Christmas. I hope so.
Yeah. We're hoping. We're hoping.
We are.
Yeah.
Thank you guys. I appreciate that. Our whole team appreciates that. We're all pretty wrought over it, and it's the outpouring of support has just been really touching, really encouraging. It's an affirmation for as to why we do this. Because it's all for you guys. It's all. I mean, it's for us. Everybody who's going to appreciate this. And, it's funny that it's just a movie, but it's more than that to people. I mean, storytelling it's at our core, right? As a species, it's an ingrained part of us. It's how we pass on information and morals and all sorts of other, inborn material that needs to survive so we can survive. So I really honestly believe that storytelling is a means to survive, and people will fight for it, even if it's something as silly as Scooby-Doo, because on the surface it's Scooby-Doo, but underneath every great story are these undeniable universal human truths that we can all relate to, that behind the scenes we work very hard to make sure that we're not just giving you guys a facade of a story, that it's actually laced with meaning, and that it's actually can affect people. So yeah, thank you all for your support. Thank you guys for having me on. Fingers crossed that this comes out, and if not, it's gonna be the same group of people making the next film for you guys to enjoy.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I have one more question.
Yeah.
Do you have any projects coming up that you want to tell us about?
Me personally, or Warner Brothers, or
You.
me personally? Nothing that I can mention. If anybody wants to learn about storytelling and sort of narrative structure theory, fun stuff, you could head over to narrativefirst.com, I think it is. I teach a couple classes there. It's a good community of artists and writers. We've designed like an outlining app to help you guys write stories, and we're starting to fold in some AI technology. It's sort of like having a virtual writing partner. You can bounce ideas off, and it'll suggest things based on what you say, and it's becoming pretty smart, pretty robust. It's a good community for anybody interested in telling stories. Wants to get into that. Yeah, I guess it's the only thing I can mention right now. There's other projects brewing and happening, but what was the word?
That's awesome.
Yeah, but there are some stuff from Warner Brothers coming out that's pretty exciting. I think it's been announced. There's the Toto movie they're working on, and there might be a Dr. Seuss property happening. I don't know if that's been announced. That's as much as I'm going to say. But very cool. Another icon from our youth that is getting a proper treatment in the future.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for giving us your time. We really enjoyed listening to you talk and your stories and learning about your career. It's just amazing. And we wish you the best of luck in anything that you're doing in the future. And, fingers crossed that we get Scoob Holiday Haunt.
Yeah, I really hope we can figure out how to get it to you guys. I think you're all going to love it. I really love it. The screenings that we had, people responded off the charts. It was great. So yeah, I hope it sees the light of day. And thank you for having me. This has been a blast.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's awesome to talk to people and really hear from their perspective, what it's like to work in the industry, what it's like for you personally. So we
it's
really
fun.
appreciate it.
Yeah, anytime you guys want to talk shop, happy to do it.
Thank you for tuning in to another Scooby panel. I'm Nikki Blake from ScoobyAddicts.com. If you like these panels, please subscribe to my channel for more great discussions. A huge shout out to our patrons, Ross from ScoobyFan.net, Carson Maitland-Smith, Scooby-Doo of Roblox, and Ruth Elliott Hillston. If you would like to support the Scooby panel, please go to patreon.com/ScoobyAddicts. A very special thank you to artist and animator John Dusenberry, artist, blogger, and Scooby collector Wendy BRYDGE, and Cameron Bates from Scooby-Doo and Cameron Too. Scooby and Shaggy were voiced by Scott Innes. Check out Scott's website, onescottshop.com. Scooby Panel is available in podcast form on most podcast platforms, or as a web series on YouTube. Scooby Addicts artwork by Will Davenport, video editing by Nikki Blake, music composed and performed by Bovine Nightmares. Please join us next time for another Scooby panel.